So there you are, lying still in the dark, and even now, in this quiet, your body is already at work. You don't have to tell it to begin. You don't have to push a button or remember a set of instructions. Right now, as your breathing slows and the weight of the day begins to lift, a whole quiet effort is already underway, a kind of gentle, constant watchfulness that never really stops. And that watchfulness begins at the very edge of you, at the place where your body meets the world. It begins with your skin. Think of your skin for a moment, not as a thing you see in the mirror, but as a vast, soft, continuous sheet, a covering that wraps you entirely from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet. It is the largest single thing your body has, this outer layer, and its first job is simply to be a wall. A calm, silent, unbroken wall. The very outermost part of that wall, the part that the air touches right now, the part that rests against the pillowcase or the sheet, is made of cells that are no longer alive. They are flat and they are packed together very tightly, overlapping like the thin scales of a fish or like the shingles on a roof. They have moved up from the deeper, living layers beneath, slowly, over the course of weeks, and by the time they reach the surface they have become a tough, flexible shield. They are filled with a protein called keratin, a word that simply means a strong, fibrous material, the same kind of material that makes up your hair and your fingernails. This layer of cells, this outermost covering, is called the epidermis, and its entire purpose, in a way, is to be dry, to be tough, and to be very hard for anything small and unwanted to slip through. It is a desert on purpose. Most bacteria, most tiny particles that land on you, find this surface too dry, too salty, and too tightly sealed to penetrate. They just sit there, on top of the dead cells, and eventually they flake away, carried off by the softest brush of air or the gentle rub of clothing, without ever having found a way inside. And the skin doesn't just act as a physical wall made of cells. It also has a quiet chemical way of keeping watch. The oils on your skin, the very faint sheen that you might notice on your forehead on a warm day, are not simply water. They are oils produced by tiny glands tucked down beneath the surface, and these oils carry a slightly acidic quality. That slight acidity is another soft barrier, a kind of quiet chemical whisper that many germs simply do not like. It makes the surface of your skin a place that is hard to live on for more than a little while. So your skin works in two ways at once. It is a strong, overlapping physical fence, and it is also a gentle, chemically unwelcoming place. All of this very clever, very calm defense, is happening without you having to think about it at all. You are lying there, and your skin is simply doing what it has always done, keeping the inside in and the outside out. Now let that thought travel inward, just a little, to the places where the skin stops and the softer, more open linings of the body begin. Places like the inside of your nose, your mouth, your throat, and the passageways that lead down into your lungs. These places are still inside you, but they are open to the outside air in a way your skin is not. So the body has a different strategy here, a different kind of gentle barrier. It uses something called mucus. That word might not sound very restful at first, but think of it differently. Think of it as a clear, slow-moving river, a river that is always flowing very gently in the wrong direction for anything that wants to get in. In your nose and in your airways, there are cells that produce this sticky, wet substance, and it coats the lining of those passages like a thin, protective gel. When you breathe in, the air carries all sorts of tiny floating things with it, specks of dust, little grains of pollen, mold spores, and sometimes bacteria or bits of virus. And when that air passes over the moist lining of your nose and throat, a great many of those particles get caught. They stick to the mucus, trapped in its slow, steady flow like a leaf landing on the surface of a stream. And that stream is always moving, always sweeping very gently backward, toward the throat, where the trapped material is swallowed. And once it is swallowed, it goes down into the stomach, and the stomach has its own very strong way of dealing with it, which we will come to in a moment. But for now, just picture that quiet river inside you, that soft, sticky blanket lining your airways, just catching things, holding them, and carrying them harmlessly away while you breathe, in and out, without a single conscious thought. This same kind of quiet chemistry appears in other places too, in fluids so ordinary you would never think of them as part of a defense system. Your tears, for example. Not the tears of strong emotion, but the everyday tears that keep your eyes moist and comfortable. The thin film of fluid that washes across the surface of your eye every time you blink. That fluid contains a helper, a small protein with a long name that is often shortened to an even simpler one, lysozyme. Lysozyme is a kind of enzyme, which means it is a molecule that can help break other things down. In this case, lysozyme can break apart the outer wall of certain kinds of bacteria. It finds a weak spot in their structure, a kind of chemical link, and it snips it. When you blink, you are not just clearing dust from your eye, you are washing the surface with a mild but effective antibacterial rinse. And this same helper, lysozyme, is also present in your saliva, in the spit in your mouth. All through the day, and even now as you lie still, your mouth is being bathed in a fluid that is gently, very gently, working against some of the bacteria that might try to settle there. It is not a harsh chemical. It is not something you can feel. It is just there, part of the quiet background work of the body. The stomach, the place where swallowed food and swallowed germs end up, takes a more forceful approach, though it is still just a part of the same calm, automatic system. Deep inside your stomach, there are cells whose only job is to produce a very strong acid, called hydrochloric acid. This acid is so strong that it can dissolve a piece of metal over a long enough time. But your stomach has a special lining of its own, a thick, protective coat of mucus again, which keeps the acid from digesting the stomach itself. The acid's purpose, for defense, is simply to destroy. Most of the bacteria that get swallowed along with food or mucus do not survive the bath of acid in the stomach. They are broken apart, their structures unraveled by the extreme sourness of the environment. This is a very old form of defense, one that has been around for a very, very long time in the history of life. It is blunt, and it is effective, and it works while you sleep just as well as it works when you are awake and eating a meal. There are also more forceful, more sudden physical defenses at these borders, and they are often misunderstood. A cough is not a sign that the body is failing. A cough is a reflex, a built-in automatic ejection system. If something irritates the lining of the throat or the airways, a signal travels to the brain, and the brain sends a signal back to the muscles of the chest and the diaphragm to contract in a very specific, coordinated way. The vocal cords snap shut, pressure builds, and then they open, and a burst of air rushes out, carrying the irritating particle with it. A sneeze works on a similar principle, but it starts in the nose. An irritation in the nasal lining triggers a deep, quick breath, and then a powerful release of air, a sudden wind that can shoot droplets and dust far out into the surrounding air. From the body's perspective, this is a good and useful thing. It is clearing the passageways. It is throwing out something that might be a problem. Even now, in sleep, these reflexes are ready, though they are much quieter. Your body is still monitoring the airway, still keeping watch, even as your conscious mind drifts further and further from the surface of waking. These reflexes are not signs of weakness. They are proof that the outer wall is paying attention. All of these things together, the dry, dead cell layer of the skin, the acid oils on its surface, the sticky river of mucus in the nose and throat, the bacteria snipping helpers in tears and saliva, the powerful acid bath in the stomach, and the quick, forceful reflexes of cough and sneeze, all of these make up the very first line of defense. They are the outer wall. They are not the immune system proper, not the part with the wandering cells and the learned memories. They are older than that. They are the simple, physical and chemical barriers that evolve to stop most problems before they ever start. And they work so well, so quietly, that you live your whole life mostly unaware of them. You don't feel the skin sealing you off from the world. You don't feel the lysozyme in your tears doing its slow, gentle work. You don't feel the mucus river flowing. You don't feel the stomach acid waiting at the bottom. This is because, for the most part, there is nothing to feel. The wall is doing its job, the border is quiet. Consider, just for another peaceful moment, the sheer scale of what this quiet outer wall handles every single day. All day long you are touching surfaces, breathing air, eating food, and every one of those actions brings you into contact with a vast number of tiny living things. The world is absolutely full of bacteria, of fungal spores, of microscopic particles. They are in the soil, in the water, in the air, on the fur of animals, on the hands of people you greet. A single gram of garden soil, a tiny pinch that would fit on the tip of your finger, can contain several billion individual bacteria. That is more bacteria than there are people on Earth, all in that tiny pinch of soil. And yet you can touch that soil, brush it off your hands, and go on about your day. Your outer wall, your skin, simply did not let any of them through. The vast, overwhelming majority of those encounters end at the barrier. They never become an infection. They never cause a fever or a swelling. They are stopped cold at the outermost edge of you, and you never even know they were there. Even the small number of bacteria and particles that do make it past the skin, that get breathed in or swallowed, are mostly caught and destroyed by the next layers, the mucus, the stomach acid, the enzymes. The number that actually get deep into the body, into the blood or the tissues where they could cause real trouble, is vanishingly small. The outer wall is that good at its job. It is that calm and that capable. And what is remarkable, what is deeply restful to consider, is that this system does not require your attention. You do not have to direct your skin to be a better barrier. You do not have to remind your stomach lining to produce acid. You do not have to consciously blink to wash your eyes with lysozyme. The blink comes on its own, a gentle reflex that you only notice if you think about it. The mucus flows on its own. The skin renews itself on its own, the dead cells flaking away and being replaced from below. A slow, silent shedding and rebuilding that never asks for your input. You can lie there in the dark, your mind drifting, and the outer wall remains, patient and unbroken, holding the line between you and everything else. And perhaps, as you feel the soft weight of your body settling into the bed, you can bring a gentle awareness to this wall without any need for effort. You might feel the air on the skin of your face and know that the skin is sealing you. You might feel the slow, even movement of your breath and picture the air passing over the moist, protective lining of your nose, particles catching there, being swept gently away. You might swallow, once, and picture the acid in your stomach far below, standing ready. None of this needs you. None of it has ever needed you. It was working long before you were born, and it will keep working long after you fall asleep tonight. It is the oldest, simplest part of your body's defense, the part that says, quietly, this is inside, and that is outside, and the two shall not mix without a very good reason. Of course, the wall is not perfect. If it were perfect, there would be no need for anything deeper. Sometimes the skin gets a cut, a small break in the shingles. Sometimes a germ is shaped in a way that lets it slip past the mucus river, or it carries a coating that protects it from the acid in the stomach. And when that happens, when the outer wall is breached, a new kind of response begins. It is faster, more active, and it involves cells that can move and respond and change. But that is a story for another moment. For now, it is enough to rest in the knowledge of the wall, to rest in the quiet fact that right now, in this very moment, as your breathing deepens and your thoughts begin to soften at the edges, your body is sealed, you are held, the outer border is calm, and it is intact, and it is working with a slow, steady, ancient wisdom that asks absolutely nothing of you. The first line is drawn, and it is holding. The first line is drawn, and it is holding. But now let us imagine, very softly, that somewhere along that outer wall, a small break has happened, nothing dramatic. Just a tiny nick in the skin, the kind you might get from the edge of a piece of paper, so small you barely notice it at all, and into that tiny opening, a few bacteria have slipped. They have crossed the desert of the dead cell layer. They have made it past the acid oils. They are now in the warm, living tissue just beneath the surface, a place where they do not belong, and the moment they arrive, something already knows. This knowing is not like the knowing of your conscious mind. It is not a thought. It is a much older kind of recognition, a pattern that has been built into the body's cells over hundreds of millions of years. The body has a way of sensing things that are simply not supposed to be there, things that carry a general signature of foreignness, a kind of common chemical handwriting that says, "I am not part of this body." And when that handwriting is detected, a response begins that is just as automatic, just as quiet, as the outer wall itself. This is the second layer of defense. This is the first active response. It is called the innate immune system, the built-in, always ready part of your body's protection. The word innate just means something you are born with, something that is already there, fully formed and ready to go, from the very first day of your life. It does not need to learn. It does not need to be trained. It responds the same way every time, whether it has seen a particular germ before or not. The stars of this immediate response are cells. Moving, living, independent cells that travel through your body in ways that would seem very slow and gentle if you could watch them, but which are, at their own tiny scale, a constant, patient patrol. These cells are part of a larger family called white blood cells, a name that simply distinguishes them from the red blood cells that carry oxygen. Red blood cells are busy with air. White blood cells are busy with defense. There are not as many white blood cells as there are red ones. For every single white blood cell, there are roughly 700 red blood cells. But a few million white blood cells are in your blood at any given moment, and many more are waiting in the tissues, just resting, just watching. Right now, as you lie still, they are moving through you with a slow, drifting motion, carried along by the current of your blood, or creeping along the fibers of your tissues, feeling their way with tiny extensions of their own bodies. The very first of these cells to notice a break in the wall are usually the ones that already live in the tissues themselves. They are called macrophages, a word that comes from Greek roots meaning big eater, and that is a very plain and accurate description of what they do. A macrophage is a large, slow-moving cell, and its main job is to surround and absorb things that do not belong. Picture it as a soft, shape-shifting bag, a blob that can reach out and wrap itself around a bacterium, pulling the bacterium inside its own body and then breaking it down with powerful chemicals. This process is called phagocytosis, a technical word that means simply cell eating. But you do not need to remember the word. You only need the image, a gentle, enveloping hug that removes something unwanted from the picture entirely. The macrophage also does another quiet, useful thing. It helps clean up. When cells die, either from age or from injury, the macrophage arrives to clear away the debris, tidying up the site so that the real work of repair can begin. It is, in a way, both a defender and a housekeeper, moving through the tissues with a kind of patient, unhurried thoroughness. But when a break in the skin happens, the macrophages already in the area are often not quite enough on their own. The break is a signal, and that signal needs to reach reinforcements. So the injured cells and the activated macrophages send out chemical messages. These messages are small molecules that drift away from the site of the break, seeping into the surrounding tissue and into the tiny blood vessels nearby. They are like a very quiet, very local whisper, a call that says simply, "Here, over here, something is not right," and the blood vessels respond. They begin to widen just a little, and their walls become a little more porous, a little more open, so that the cells and fluid inside can slip out more easily into the tissue. This widening is the very beginning of what will later become inflammation, a process we will spend more time with soon. But for now, the important part is that the call is being heard, and the reinforcements are on their way. The first cells to arrive in large numbers are called neutrophils. Like macrophages, they are white blood cells, but they are smaller, faster, and very short-lived. A neutrophil lives only for a few hours once it leaves the bone marrow where it was born. It is a cell that is built to rush in, do its work, and then quietly expire, to be cleaned up later by the macrophages. Neutrophils are the most common white blood cell in your blood, making up about half to two-thirds of all the white blood cells you have. And they are very good at responding to those chemical whispers. When they receive the signal, they slow down, stick to the inside wall of the blood vessel, near the site of the break, and then begin to squeeze their way through tiny gaps between the cells of the vessel wall. This squeezing is a slow, deliberate process, the cell elongating and flattening, sliding through an opening that is smaller than the cell itself. Once on the other side, in the tissue, the neutrophil begins to move toward the source of the signal, a migration that is guided by the increasing concentration of those chemical messenger molecules. It is like following the scent of something, a slow, blind drift toward where the message is strongest. When the neutrophil arrives at the site of the break, it does what macrophages do, it surrounds and absorbs bacteria. But it does so with a kind of focused, short-term intensity. A neutrophil can absorb and destroy several bacteria before its own internal supply of destructive chemicals runs out, and then it dies. In a significant infection, the number of neutrophils arriving at a site can be so great that their accumulated dead bodies form pus, a thick, whitish fluid that is simply a collection of spent neutrophils and the debris of their work. It is not a pretty thing to think about, but it is, in its own way, a perfectly normal and healthy sign. It means the first responders arrived, they did their job, and they gave everything they had. They are a sacrifice cell, a short, bright flash of defense, gone almost as soon as they arrive. Now, all of this, the macrophages sensing, the chemical signals being sent, the blood vessels widening, the neutrophils squeezing through and migrating toward the trouble, all of this happens the same way, regardless of what kind of germ has entered the body. The innate immune system does not stop to identify the specific species of bacterium. It does not ask, are you a staphylococcus or a streptococcus or something else entirely? It simply recognizes a pattern that is common to many different kinds of bacteria, a pattern that says, this thing has molecules on its surface that are not found in human cells. Those molecules might be certain types of proteins, certain types of sugars, certain types of fats, that are only built by bacterial cells and never by the cells of a human body. The innate system has a small library of these pattern recognition tools, a set of master keys that can open a lot of different locks. And when one of those keys fits, the response is triggered. It is a blunt instrument, but it is a very effective one, and it is fast. Minutes after the break in the skin, the chemical whispers are already spreading. Within an hour, the neutrophils are already arriving. The body does not hesitate. It does not wait for permission. It just begins. While this is happening at the site of the break, there is another layer of the innate response happening more broadly, throughout the whole body. There are proteins in the blood and in the tissue fluid that are always circulating, always present, and they too can recognize the common patterns of germs. One such group of proteins is called the complement system, and it is old, ancient, present in some form in creatures as simple as sea urchins. When these proteins bump into a bacterial surface, they can stick to it, and once stuck, they can do a few helpful things. They can poke holes directly in the bacterial membrane, causing the bacterium to leak and die. They can act like a kind of glue, coating the bacterium and making it more attractive to macrophages and neutrophils, easier for those cells to grab. And they can also, in their own way, send out chemical signals that call in more help. The complement system is not made of cells. It is made of free-floating molecules, tiny soluble machines that just drift along, bumping into things, and when they bump into something foreign, they change shape and become active. It is a cascade, a chain reaction, one protein activating the next, and the next, and the next. a quiet domino fall of defense happening in the fluid around your cells. All of this is happening right now. Even if there is no break in your skin at this very moment, the components of the innate system are still there, still ready. The macrophages are still resting in your tissues, their slow, shape-shifting bodies just waiting. The neutrophils are still circulating in your blood, billions of them, drifting along in the current, their short lives ticking away until they are needed, or until they simply age out and are cleaned up. The complement proteins are still floating in the fluid between your cells, their shapes quiet and inactive, ready to change the instant they touch something foreign. The readiness is constant. The watch is never suspended. You do not have to wake up to tell your neutrophils to patrol. You do not have to remember to activate your complement proteins. They are part of the same silent, steady background rhythm as your heartbeat and your breathing, a rhythm that began before you were aware of anything at all, and that will continue long after you have drifted off to sleep tonight. It is worth pausing here, in the quiet of this moment, to appreciate something about the way these cells work. They are not driven by any kind of intention or will. They do not have a little mind. They are small, wet machines, following simple rules. A macrophage moves toward a chemical signal because the signal causes changes in the cell's internal skeleton, making one side of the cell push forward while the other side retracts. A neutrophil squeezes through a blood vessel wall because the chemical signals make the cells on the vessel wall slightly looser, and the neutrophil itself becomes more flexible. A complement protein changes shape when it touches a bacterial surface, because the surface provides a certain kind of chemical environment that the protein is primed to respond to. These are all just physical and chemical events, simple cause and effect, happening at a scale too small to see. And yet, when you put all these simple events together, the result is a system that can find a single splinter in your finger and begin to surround it, break it down, and clear it away, all without you ever consciously directing a single step. The complexity emerges from the simplicity. The watchfulness comes from a trillion tiny, unthinking parts, all doing their one small thing. And so, as you lie here, your body is not just a sealed wall. It is a sealed wall with a ready army already positioned just behind it, an army that never sleeps, never gets tired, never needs to be told to stand at ease. The outer wall and the first responders work together, one immediately after the other. The wall stops almost everything. The few things that slip past are met by the macrophages, and if the macrophages need help, they call the neutrophils. And all of this whole choreography of sensing and moving and absorbing and cleaning happens while you are utterly unaware. You do not feel the macrophage wrapping itself around a bacterium. You do not feel the complement proteins sticking to a foreign surface. You do not feel the individual neutrophils squeezing through the walls of your capillaries. The scale is too small for the nerves to register. It is a silent war, fought at a level beneath sensation, and the only time you notice it at all is when the response becomes large enough to cause the familiar signs of heat and redness and swelling, which is its own quiet story, a story for another moment. For now, it is enough to know that the first responders are there. They are in you, around you, moving through you, with a patience that matches the patience of your own slow breathing. You can picture them, if you like, as tiny, soft shapes drifting in a gentle current, a current that carries them everywhere they need to go. You can picture the macrophages resting in the dark of your tissues, their surfaces gently rippling, waiting for a signal that may not come tonight, or any night, but which they are always, always ready to hear. You can picture the neutrophils, the short-lived soldiers, tumbling slowly through your veins, their time running out, but their purpose perfectly intact for the moment they are needed. And you can picture the complement proteins, small and simple, tumbling through the fluid between your cells, their shapes folded and quiet, ready to unfold into action at the lightest touch of something that does not belong. All of this is happening. All of this is you. The break in the wall has been answered. The first responders have arrived, and the quiet work of the innate immune system is already well underway, long before the slower, more thoughtful part of the defense even knows there is a problem. That part is still to come. But for now, the immediate is taken care of. The first wave is in place. The body is watching itself, and it is calm. The body is watching itself, and it is calm. But sometimes, when the first responders have been working for a little while, the quiet effort begins to make itself known to you. Not as pain, not necessarily, but as a set of familiar sensations that you have felt many times before. A cut that feels warm to the touch, a scrape that looks redder than the skin around it, a slight puffiness, a little swelling, a tenderness when you press on it. These sensations have names: redness, warmth, swelling, and soreness. Together, they are the four classic signs of a process called inflammation. And the word inflammation can sound worrying, because we often hear it in the context of illness or injury, but in its simplest and most ordinary form, inflammation is not the problem itself. It is the visible, feelable sign that the defense system is working. It is the body showing you, in its own quiet language, that help has arrived. Let us take these signs one at a time, slowly, and see what they actually mean. The redness and the warmth come from the same root cause. Remember the chemical whispers that the macrophages sent out, the quiet signals calling for reinforcements. One of the things those signals do is tell the small blood vessels in the area to widen, to open up, and let more blood flow through. This widening is called vasodilation, a word that simply means the vessels are dilating, stretching open a little more than usual. When the vessels widen, more warm blood from the core of the body rushes into the area. Blood is warm because it comes from deep inside, where the temperature is held steady at around 37 degrees Celsius. So when extra blood flows into a place just under the skin, that place feels warmer. And because blood is red, the increased flow makes the area look redder. It is exactly the same principle as your cheeks flushing when you are warm or embarrassed. The vessels are simply letting more blood through, and the color and the heat come with it. Now, this widening of the vessels does more than just change how the skin looks and feels. It also makes the vessel walls more open, more porous. Tiny gaps appear between the cells that make up the vessel wall, and through those gaps, fluid can seep out into the surrounding tissue. This fluid is called plasma, the clear, straw-colored liquid part of blood in which the red and white cells float. When plasma leaks out into the tissue, it carries with it more of those complement proteins we talked about, more clotting factors that can help seal a wound, and more white blood cells that can join the fight. But the extra fluid also takes up space. It fills the tissue like water soaking into a sponge, and that causes the tissue to expand, to puff up slightly. That is the swelling, the third sign. Swelling is simply extra fluid, extra plasma, bringing extra help to the site where it is needed. It can feel tight or uncomfortable, but that tightness is just the physical presence of the body's own delivery system, a temporary flooding of the area with the tools of defense and repair. The soreness, the fourth sign, is a little more complex, but it follows the same logic. Some of the chemical signals released during this process can irritate the endings of the nerves in the area. They are not damaging the nerves, but they are lowering the threshold for what the nerve registers as a sensation. A touch that would normally feel neutral, or a bit of pressure that you would not even notice, now registers as tender or sore. This has a purpose. The soreness makes you favor the area. If your ankle is swollen and tender, you are likely to limp a little, to put less weight on it, to move it less. And that rest gives the immune cells more room to work without further disturbance. The soreness is, in its own way, a signal from the body to the conscious mind, a gentle request to go easy on that part for a little while. It is a quiet conversation between your tissues and your brain, a conversation that says, "There is work happening here. Give it space. Let it be still." So the four signs together, redness, warmth, swelling, and soreness, are not a sign that something has gone wrong. They are a sign that something has gone right. They are the evidence that the blood vessels widened on cue, that the fluid arrived with its cargo of proteins and cells, that the nerves are doing their gentle job of asking for rest. The process is coordinated and it is ancient. Even very simple animals, creatures without backbones, creatures that live in the sea, show some version of this same response when they are injured. It is a fundamental part of having a body, this ability to bring resources to a place that needs them, to flood a damaged area with the materials of repair. And this brings us to a related but distinct response, one that involves the whole body rather than just a local site. Fever. A fever is not the same as the local warmth of an inflamed cut. A fever is a rise in the body's overall internal temperature, the temperature of the core, the deep places where the vital organs sit. And it is not a passive thing, not something that just happens to the body because of an infection. It is something the body does on purpose. Deep in the brain, there is a small region called the hypothalamus, a word you do not need to hold on to. You can think of it simply as the body's thermostat. It is a small cluster of cells that monitors the temperature of the blood and sends signals to adjust it, much like the thermostat on a wall controls a heating system. When certain immune signals reach this thermostat, signals released by macrophages and other cells during a widespread infection, the thermostat resets itself to a higher target. The body deliberately decides to be warmer. It achieves this by using the same mechanisms it would use to warm up on a cold day. Blood vessels near the skin constrict, narrowing to keep warm blood deeper inside. Muscles may shiver, tiny rapid contractions that generate heat. And you feel cold, even though your internal temperature is rising, because your brain has set the target higher and your current temperature is now below that target. You feel the need to pull up a blanket, to curl up, to conserve warmth. All of this is the body working to reach its new, higher set point. And why does it do this? The reason is simple. Many bacteria and viruses reproduce more slowly at higher temperatures. The heat does not kill them outright, not at the modest temperatures a human body can safely reach, but it slows them down. It makes their internal processes less efficient. Meanwhile, some of the body's own immune cells actually work a little better, a little faster, at a slightly elevated temperature. So the fever is a strategic shift, a deliberate change in the internal environment to favor the defender and disfavor the invader. It is not a sign of chaos. It is a sign of a controlled, calculated adjustment. Of course, a very high fever is dangerous, and the body usually has safety limits built in. Most fevers from common infections stay within a range that is uncomfortable but not harmful. The thermostat does not lose control. It simply moves the dial a few degrees up, holds it there while the immune system does its work, and then, when the signals fade, moves it back down again. The breaking of a fever, the moment when you suddenly feel warm and begin to sweat, is the thermostat resetting to normal. The sweat is the body shedding the extra heat, opening the skin vessels back up, letting the warmth flow out. It is the end of the deliberate warming period, the return to baseline. What is restful about all of this, what you can let settle into your mind as you lie here, is that none of these processes require your conscious understanding or approval. You do not need to know that your blood vessels are widening. You do not need to manually adjust your own thermostat. The redness and the warmth and the swelling and the soreness, and even the fever, all unfold according to a script that is written into your cells, a script that has been refined over an immense stretch of time. The body is not panicking, it is not overreacting, it is executing a series of steps that have worked in their basic form for a very long time. The inflammation that you can see and feel is just the surface ripple of a deep, quiet process, a process that is organized and purposeful. Think of it this way. When you see redness around a small cut, you are not looking at damage, you are looking at delivery. You are seeing the color of oxygen-rich blood, bringing energy and materials to the cells that are doing the work. When you feel warmth, you are feeling the heat of that blood, the warmth of increased activity, the metabolic hum of cells that are busy. When you notice swelling, you are noticing the physical presence of the fluid that carries the repair tools, the protein scaffolding, the immune cells that will clean and rebuild. And when you feel soreness, you are feeling a signal that has been sent for your own benefit, a message to move carefully, to protect the area while the quiet work continues beneath the surface. None of this is the illness itself. The illness is the germ. The inflammation is the response to the germ. They are two different things, and it is easy to blur them together because they happen at the same time. But if you can separate them in your mind, even just a little, the sensation of inflammation can begin to feel less like a problem and more like a reassurance. Something is happening. The body is not ignoring the breach, it is on it, fully, calmly, with all the tools it has. And the same is true for fever. The aches and the chills and the tiredness that come with a fever are not the germ doing those things to you. They are the body doing them to itself, for a reason. The tiredness is the body pulling energy away from your muscles and your conscious brain, redirecting it toward the immune system, which needs a great deal of energy to produce all those cells and proteins. The aches in your joints and muscles are partly caused by the same chemical signals that reset the thermostat, signals that can make nerves more sensitive. It all connects. The whole body, during a significant infection, shifts into a kind of defense mode, a mode that prioritizes immune function over other activities like movement, digestion, and complex thought. That is why you feel like lying down. That is why you lose your appetite. That is why your mind feels foggy. The body is making choices, very old choices, about where to spend its limited energy, and those choices, however uncomfortable they may be, are not mistakes. So as you lie here now, in a state of health, in a state of rest, you can appreciate that this whole machinery is present inside you, ready and waiting. The macrophages are there, the neutrophils are there, the complement proteins are there, and the instructions for inflammation are there too, packed into every cell, ready to be read out when the signal comes. You carry with you the ability to redden, to warm, to swell, to grow tender, to raise your own temperature in a controlled way. These are not weaknesses, they are capabilities. They are built-in responses that belong to you as much as your heartbeat and your breath. And right now, in the absence of any injury or infection, they are quiet. The vessels are at their normal width. The fluid is in its proper balance between blood and tissue. The thermostat is set to its resting level. The nerves are reporting nothing out of the ordinary. The silence you feel is not emptiness. It is readiness. It is a system waiting, fully armed, fully organized, but holding perfectly still. And that stillness is worth resting in for a moment. The same body that can raise a fever, that can flood a wound with plasma, that can make an injured joint throb with warmth, is the body that is lying here now, perfectly at peace. All those abilities are present, but they are asleep, just as you are drifting towards sleep yourself. The potential for redness and heat is there, but it is unneeded. The conditions are calm, the walls are intact, the watch is quiet, and the part of the immune system that we have been talking about so far, the fast, general, innate part, is just the first half of the story. There is another whole system, a slower and more thoughtful one, that learns and remembers and adapts. But before we go there, before we leave the innate response behind, there is one more piece of quiet plumbing to visit, a network that runs through your whole body, a gentle drainage system that carries fluid and cells and information from the tissues back toward the bloodstream. It is a system that works without a pump, moved only by the soft motions of your body, your breathing, your smallest movements, and it is central to everything the immune system does. But that is the next slow step. For now, the redness and heat are understood, and they are at rest. The thermostat holds steady, the vessels are calm, the body is warm and quiet and ready. The body is warm and quiet and ready. And now we come to a part of the defense story that is less known, less felt, but utterly essential. It is a network that runs alongside the familiar system of blood vessels, a kind of second, quieter circulatory system. When we think of circulation, we naturally think of the heart. the steady pump that pushes blood through arteries and veins, the pulse we can feel in our wrist or our neck. But there is another set of vessels, another flowing liquid, and it has no central pump at all. It is called the lymphatic system, and the fluid that moves through it is called lymph. The word lymph comes from a Latin word for clear water, and that is a fitting name, because lymph is a clear, slightly straw-colored fluid that moves slowly, quietly, through its own set of channels, carrying things that the blood cannot carry, and serving as a kind of gentle drainage and transport network for the immune system. To understand why we have this second system, it helps to go back to something we talked about in the previous section. When inflammation happens, when the blood vessels widen and become more porous, fluid leaks out into the tissues. That fluid is plasma, the liquid part of blood. Some of that fluid gets pulled back into the blood vessels at the far end of the capillary bed, but not all of it. A little bit is always left behind in the tissues, along with any debris, any dead cells, any small particles that need to be cleared away. If that fluid were not drained, it would build up and the tissues would swell permanently. The lymphatic system is the drainage system that solves this problem. It begins as a web of very tiny, blind-ended tubes, microscopic vessels that are woven through the tissues of nearly every part of your body. These tiny tubes are made of overlapping cells that act like one-way flaps. When the pressure of the fluid in the tissue rises, the flaps open inward, and the fluid seeps into the vessel. Once inside, it becomes lymph, and it cannot flow back out because the flaps close behind it. The lymph is now inside the lymphatic vessels, and it begins a long, slow journey back toward the bloodstream. This journey is slow because there is no pump. The lymphatic system does not have a heart. It relies on the gentle squeezing of the vessels by the muscles around them. Every time you move, every time you take a step, every time you shift your position in bed, every breath you take that moves your diaphragm up and down, you are gently compressing the lymphatic vessels and pushing the fluid along. The vessels have one-way valves inside them, little gates that open in the direction of flow and snap shut to prevent backflow. So the lymph moves in fits and starts, a quiet, patient drift, more like water seeping through a meadow than like a river rushing down a channel. It is a system that rewards movement, that depends on the soft, rhythmic motions of the body at rest or in gentle activity. Even the slow rise and fall of your chest as you breathe right now is giving small, subtle nudges to the lymph in your torso, helping it creep along its path. Along this path, at strategic points throughout the body, the lymphatic vessels pass through small, bean-shaped structures. These are the lymph nodes. You have hundreds of them, clustered in certain places, the sides of your neck, deep in your armpits, in your groin, in your chest, in your abdomen. A lymph node is a filtering station. The lymph flows into it on one side, percolates slowly through a mesh of immune cells, and then flows out the other side, cleaner and more carefully screened than it was before. If you imagine the lymphatic vessels as a network of quiet roads, the lymph nodes are the checkpoints along those roads, places where the traffic is slowed down and inspected. Inside a lymph node, the mesh is packed with the same kinds of cells we have already met. Macrophages are there, the big eaters, waiting to surround and absorb any bacteria or debris that have been swept up from the tissues. But there are also other cells, cells we have not yet spent much time with, cells that belong to the slower, more thoughtful part of the immune system, the adaptive part. These are called lymphocytes, a name that simply means lymph cells. They include B cells and T cells, the cells that will eventually learn to recognize specific germs and remember them for a lifetime. We will come to these cells in much more detail soon. But for now, it is enough to know that the lymph nodes are where these cells often gather, where they wait, and where they first encounter the materials that the lymph has carried to them. A lymph node is a meeting place, a quiet, crowded room where the information about what is happening out in the tissues is presented to the cells that can do something specific about it. This is why lymph nodes can swell during an infection. You may have felt it yourself, a tender lump on the side of your neck when you had a sore throat, or a sore spot in your armpit. That swelling is not a malfunction, it is the lymph node working hard. When an infection is underway somewhere in the body, the lymph draining from that area carries bits of the germ, bits of dead cells, and chemical signals. When this lymph reaches the nearest lymph node, the immune cells inside that node become activated. They start to divide, to multiply, to build up their numbers so they can respond more effectively. The node itself expands, filling with more and more cells, becoming a busy hub of activity. It can become large enough to feel with your fingers, and tender because the expansion stretches the capsule that surrounds the node. This tenderness is, once again, not the illness itself. It is evidence of a response, a visible and feelable sign that the filtering station is doing exactly what it was built to do. The lymphatic system is also the route by which many immune cells travel from one part of the body to another. White blood cells can move through the blood, but they can also move through the lymph. They can enter the lymphatic vessels in the tissues, drift to a lymph node, spend some time there, and then exit the node and eventually re-enter the bloodstream near the heart, where the main lymphatic channel, called the thoracic duct, empties into a large vein. This constant, slow circulation of cells between blood, tissues, and lymph allows the immune system to survey the entire body. A macrophage in your fingertip can pick up a piece of a germ, carry it into the local lymphatic vessels, travel to a lymph node in your armpit, and there show that piece to a T cell, which then begins to divide and send copies of itself out into the blood to hunt for the same germ anywhere else in the body. The lymphatic system is, in this sense, the intelligence network of the immune system. It is the quiet postal service that delivers samples from the front lines to the command centers. There is one organ in this system that deserves a special mention, and it is called the spleen. The spleen is a soft, fist-sized organ that sits in the upper left side of your abdomen, tucked up under the ribs. It is part of the lymphatic system, but instead of filtering lymph, it filters blood. As blood flows through the spleen's internal structure slows it down and passes it through a mesh of macrophages and other immune cells. Old, worn-out red blood cells are removed and recycled. Any bacteria or other foreign particles that have managed to get into the blood are captured and destroyed. And the spleen also serves as a storage place for certain immune cells, a reservoir where they can wait until they are needed. It is, in a way, a very large and specialized lymph node, one that has been adapted to monitor the bloodstream directly rather than the lymph fluid. You can live without a spleen if you have to, but people who have had their spleen removed are more vulnerable to certain types of infections because they have lost that particular filtering station, that particular reservoir of ready cells. All of this, the tiny lymphatic vessels, the slow-moving lymph, the filtering nodes, the spleen, works together as a quiet, parallel circulatory system that is entirely dedicated to the work of defense and maintenance. It is the body's housekeeping network. While the blood carries oxygen and nutrients to the cells, the lymph carries away waste, debris, and information. While the heart beats loudly and forcefully, the lymph moves in near silence, a slow, steady seepage that never stops. And while the blood vessels form a closed loop, the lymphatic system is open, collecting fluid from the spaces between cells and returning it, eventually, to the blood. It is a gentle, patient, and essential part of the body's internal landscape. Consider for a moment what is flowing through your own lymphatic vessels right now, as you lie still. The fluid is clear and thin. It carries a few white blood cells, mostly lymphocytes, drifting along with the current. It carries proteins that have leaked out of the blood vessels and need to be returned. It carries, perhaps, a few dead cells, the normal debris of a body that is constantly renewing itself. And it carries, in all likelihood, nothing harmful at all. The lymph in a healthy, resting body is mostly just clear fluid, moving slowly through its channels, passing quietly through its nodes, returning to the bloodstream without any alarm. The macrophages in the lymph nodes are resting. The lymphocytes are waiting. The spleen is filtering blood at a steady, calm pace. The whole system is in a state of quiet readiness, just like the rest of the innate defenses. And yet, this quiet system is absolutely central to what comes next, because the lymphatic system is the bridge between the fast, general innate response and the slower, more specific adaptive response. It is the path by which information about a new germ reaches the cells that can learn to recognize it and remember it. Without the lymphatic system, the adaptive immune system would be isolated, unable to sample what is happening in the far-flung tissues of the body. The lymph nodes are where the conversation begins, where a macrophage that has eaten a bacterium presents pieces of that bacterium to a T cell, and the T cell says, in its own chemical way, "I see it. I will learn this shape. I will remember it." That conversation, that handoff, is the start of something remarkable, something that changes the body's defense from a blunt, general tool into a precise, targeted instrument. But that conversation cannot happen without the slow drift of lymph, the quiet drainage of the tissues, the patient delivery of samples to the waiting nodes. So as you lie here, breathing slowly, you can picture this second network inside you. It is everywhere. It is in the spaces between your cells, tiny capillaries opening their flaps to take in a little fluid. It is in the larger vessels, with their delicate one-way valves, snaking alongside the blood vessels through your arms and legs and torso. It is in the clusters of lymph nodes, quiet and small in times of health, sitting under your jaw, in your armpits, in the crease of your groin, along the central highway of your aorta. And it is in your spleen, that soft, dark red organ under your left ribs, gently sieving your blood, checking every pass for anything out of place. All of this is happening without a sound, without a sensation, without a single conscious command. The lymph is moving. It is moving right now, pushed gently by the simple fact of your breath, your heartbeat, the tiny unconscious shifts of your body settling deeper into the mattress. The drainage system is open, the filters are clear, the quiet postal service is running its rounds, and the cells that wait in the nodes are resting, their surfaces calm, their internal machinery ready to activate when the time comes. This is the environment in which the next part of our story takes place. The fast responders have done their work. The inflammation has been felt and understood. The lymph has been draining and filtering. And now, we are about to meet the cells that do not just react, but learn. The cells that carry a memory of every germ they have ever met. The cells that make a vaccine work, and that make a second infection milder than the first. They are already there, waiting in the lymph nodes, waiting in the spleen, waiting in the blood. They are the slow learners, the careful rememberers, and they are about to have their turn in the quiet light of our attention. But for now, the drainage system is enough. The lymph flows, the nodes rest, the spleen filters, and you, lying still, are part of that flow, part of that quiet drift, carried gently along by the same slow currents that have been moving inside you since the moment you began. The network is open, the way is clear. The body is listening to itself, and all is calm. The body is listening to itself, and all is calm. But listening is only the beginning. There is a part of your immune system that does more than just react to patterns. It learns. It adapts. It remembers. This is the part that takes longer to get going, days instead of minutes, but once it has learned something, it never forgets. This is the adaptive immune system, the slow, careful, precise counterpart to the fast, blunt, innate system we have been exploring. And the word adaptive means exactly what it sounds like. It is a system that can adapt, that can change its shape and its strategy to fit a specific threat. It is not born knowing every germ it will ever meet. It learns them, one by one, over the course of your life, and it keeps a record. The cells that do this learning are a special kind of white blood cell, a kind we have not yet spent much time with. They are called lymphocytes, and they are smaller than macrophages, less eager to rush in than neutrophils. They are patient and they are numerous. There are roughly 2 trillion of them in your body at any given time, a number so large it is hard to picture, but they are tiny, and they fit into the spaces of your lymph nodes, your spleen, your blood, and your tissues, without crowding anything. They wait. And the waiting is most of what they do until the moment comes when they are needed. There are two main types of these learning cells, and they have simple names: B cells and T cells. The names come from where they were first studied, but the letters are easy to remember. B cells are the ones that make antibodies, the small, floating proteins that can stick to the surface of a germ. T cells are the ones that can find and destroy cells of your own body that have already been infected, the cells that are hiding germs inside themselves. Both types are lymphocytes. Both types learn. But they learn and act in different, complementary ways. Before we go further into what these cells do, we need to understand what they see. The immune system does not see a whole bacterium the way you might see a picture of one. It sees tiny, specific parts. It sees markers. On the surface of every germ, every virus particle, every bacterium, every fungus, there are molecules that are part of that germ's structure. They might be proteins or bits of sugar or combinations of the two. These molecules are like identification badges, unique to that particular kind of germ. The immune system calls these markers antigens. An antigen is simply any molecule that the immune system can recognize as foreign, as not part of the body. It is the shape that matters. It is the key that fits into a lock, or fails to fit. The whole story of the adaptive immune system is the story of shapes, of surfaces, of things that match and things that do not. Now, each B cell and each T cell is born with a single, specific kind of receptor on its surface. A receptor is a protein that sticks out of the cell membrane, and its job is to bind to an antigen. But here is the remarkable part, the part that makes the adaptive system so powerful. The body makes B cells and T cells with an enormous variety of these receptors, a variety so vast that for almost any antigen you will ever encounter in your life, there is probably already a B cell or a T cell somewhere in your body that has a receptor that fits it. You are born with this diversity. It is generated by a kind of shuffling of genetic segments as the cells develop, a random mixing and matching that produces, by the time you are an infant, a library of billions of different receptor shapes. Most of these cells will never meet the antigen they are built for. They will live out their quiet lives in a lymph node or in the spleen and eventually die, replaced by new cells with new, random shapes. But a few of them will, one day, encounter exactly the right antigen, and when that happens, everything changes. Picture a single B cell resting in a lymph node under your jaw. It has its particular receptor, a shape that is unique among all the billions of B cells in your body. The lymph trickles through the node, carrying with it a piece of a bacterium, an antigen, that has been brought from an infection site somewhere in your throat. The antigen drifts past the resting B cell, and if the shape of the antigen happens to fit the shape of the B cell's receptor, the two bind together. This binding is a quiet physical event, a molecular handshake. But to the B cell, it is a powerful signal. It means, you are the one. You are the cell that recognizes this germ. Wake up. Get to work. And the B cell does wake up. It begins to divide, making copy after copy of itself. These copies are clones, identical cells all carrying the same receptor, all capable of recognizing the same antigen. Some of these clones become factories. They grow larger, develop more internal machinery, and begin to pump out antibodies. Antibodies are simply the soluble, free-floating version of the receptor that was on the B cell's surface. They have the same shape, the same ability to bind to the same antigen, but they are released into the blood and lymph by the millions, where they can circulate and find any other copies of that germ anywhere in the body. The B cell has taken its single, unique shape and mass-produced it, turning itself into a dedicated manufacturing plant for a single, highly specific product. T cells work a little differently, but the principle is the same. A T cell's receptor also recognizes a specific antigen, but T cells do not recognize free-floating antigens the way B cells do. They recognize antigens that are displayed on the surface of other cells. When a macrophage eats a bacterium, it does not just destroy it completely. It takes small pieces of the bacterium, the antigens, and loads them onto special display molecules on its own surface. It then travels to a lymph node and presents these pieces to T cells, like a scout returning to camp and showing everyone a drawing of the enemy. If a T cell with a matching receptor comes by, it binds, and it too wakes up and begins to divide. The activated T cells then leave the lymph node and travel to the site of the infection, where they do something very specific. They look for cells of your own body that have been infected. When a virus gets inside one of your cells, the cell displays pieces of the virus on its surface, a kind of distress flag. The T cell, with its matching receptor, recognizes that flag. It binds to the infected cell and delivers a chemical signal that tells that cell to quietly dismantle itself, to shut down and die in a controlled way, taking the virus inside it down as well. This process is called apoptosis, a word that means a programmed, orderly cell death. It is a sacrifice of the few to save the many, and the T cell is the one that gives the order. All of this, the binding, the waking up, the dividing, the producing of antibodies, the hunting down of infected cells, takes time. That is the key difference between the innate and the adaptive systems. The innate system responds in minutes to hours. The macrophages and neutrophils are already there, already active, while the B cells and T cells are still waking up. But the adaptive response, once it is fully running, is far more powerful and far more precise. And when the infection is over, when the germ has been cleared from the body, something else happens that is perhaps the most important part of the whole story. Most of the activated B cells and T cells die. They have done their job, and their numbers need to return to normal. But a small number of them do not die. They persist. They remain in the body, in the lymph nodes, in the spleen, in the bone marrow, sometimes for decades, sometimes for a whole lifetime. These are the memory cells. A memory cell is a B cell or a T cell that has already met its antigen once. It has already been activated, already divided, already done its work, and now it rests, but it rests in a different state than before. It is primed, it is alert. If that same antigen ever enters the body again, the memory cells do not need the several days it took the first time. They respond almost immediately. They divide faster, produce antibodies faster, travel to the infection site faster. The response is so quick and so strong that the germ is often eliminated before it can cause any noticeable illness at all. This is why, for many infections, you only get sick once. This is why a second encounter with the same germ is often silent, unnoticed, a battle won in the background while you go about your day feeling perfectly fine. The body has learned, the body remembers, and this learning, this remembering, is not a metaphor. It is a physical change in the body. The first time you meet a new germ, the B cell that recognizes it takes several days to build up enough numbers and enough antibodies to clear the infection. During those days, you feel ill. The fever comes, the tiredness comes, the inflammation comes. The innate system is holding the line, but it is struggling. Then the adaptive system arrives, clears the germ, and leaves memory cells behind. The next time, those memory cells spring into action so quickly that the innate system barely has to do anything. The germ is wiped out before it can get a foothold. The illness never develops. You never know you were infected. This is the quiet, invisible work of immunological memory, and it is one of the most profound capabilities your body has. So as you lie here now, you carry inside you a library of memories. Every cold you have ever had, every mild infection you fought off without even noticing, every germ you encountered and defeated, has left its mark in the form of memory cells. They are resting in your lymph nodes, in your spleen, in your bone marrow. They are not active, but they are not gone. They are a silent archive, a record written in living cells of every battle your body has ever won. You do not have to remember these battles. Your body remembers for you. And tonight, while you sleep, Those memory cells will continue to rest, waiting for a call that may never come, but ready if it does. The adaptive system, with its learning and its memory, is the reason we will spend the next few sections of our quiet tour looking more closely at antibodies, at vaccines, and at the places where these remarkable cells are born and trained. But for now, it is enough to know that the slow learners are there, inside you, patient and precise. They are the second half of the defense. The innate system is the fast, general alarm. The adaptive system is the careful investigation, the detailed file, the long-term record. Together, they form a complete and deeply capable whole. And as your breathing continues, slow and steady, you can rest in the knowledge that this whole system, the fast and the slow, the general and the specific, is present and functioning. A quiet, layered watchfulness that has been with you since the day you were born, learning and remembering, always learning, always remembering, without ever needing to be told. The shapes are stored, the keys are cut, the body is prepared, and the next time something old comes knocking, the answer will be swift and silent and sure. But that is a story we will pick up again, very soon, as we drift deeper into the quiet mechanics of locks and keys, of shapes that fit and shapes that don't, of the small, floating proteins that are the final, elegant expression of everything the immune system has learned. For now, the learners rest. The library is open, and all is still. The learners rest. The library is open, and now we arrive at the part of the story that often feels the most abstract, the hardest to picture, but it is also the part that ties everything together. We have spoken about antibodies as the floating proteins that B cells make, the small, soluble copies of the receptor that first recognized the germ. But what are they, really? What do they look like? How do they work? And why are they so central to everything the adaptive immune system does? This is the section where we slow down and spend some quiet time with the shape of things, with the idea of fit, with the simple, elegant concept of a lock and a key. An antibody is a protein, and a protein is a long chain of smaller building blocks called amino acids, folded up into a very specific three-dimensional shape. The shape is everything. It determines what the antibody can bind to, what it can recognize, what it can touch. If you were to zoom in, far beyond what the eye can see, down to the molecular level, an antibody looks a little bit like the letter Y. It has a stem, and it has two arms sticking out. At the very tip of each arm is a small, unique pocket, a groove, a surface with a particular contour. This is the binding site. This is the part that does the recognizing, and the shape of that binding site is different for every antibody that your body makes. Now think about the antigen, the marker on the surface of the germ. It too has a shape. It is a molecule, a protein or a sugar or a piece of a bacterial cell wall, and it has bumps and dips and charges distributed across its surface. When we say that an antibody recognizes an antigen, what we mean is that the shape of the antibody's binding site is the exact opposite, the exact negative image of the shape of the antigen. The antigen has a bump, and the antibody has a dip that matches it. The antigen has a positive charge, and the antibody has a negative charge right there. They fit together, not by magic, but by the same physical forces that make water bead on a waxed surface or a magnet stick to a refrigerator. It is a physical, chemical fit. It is a three-dimensional puzzle piece. It is a key sliding into a lock. This lock and key idea is the simplest and most restful way to understand antibodies. Your body has, at this moment, the ability to make antibodies with an enormous variety of different binding site shapes. The number is not infinite, but it is so large that we do not have a good everyday word for it. It is on the order of many billions, possibly more than 100 billion, different possible shapes, and this variety is generated before you are ever exposed to any germ. It is random. It is like a vast library of keys, cut in every possible configuration, waiting in their drawers for a lock to arrive. Most of these keys will never find a lock. They will sit in the drawer forever, or more precisely, the B cells that carry them, will live out their quiet lives and die without ever meeting their match. But a few of them will, one day, find a lock that fits, and when they do, that key gets copied, over and over, until the blood is full of identical keys, all fitting the same lock, all searching for more copies of that lock to bind to. When an antibody binds to its antigen, it does not, in most cases, kill the germ directly. This is a common misunderstanding, and it is worth spending a moment on. The antibody itself is not a poison. It is not a weapon in the sense of a knife or a hammer. It is more like a tag, a label, a sticky note that says, "This thing here, this thing with the matching shape, it does not belong. Deal with it." The antibody is a marker. Once an antibody has bound to a germ, that germ is now covered in little Y-shaped proteins, all with their stems sticking out. And those stems are recognized by other parts of the immune system. Macrophages, the big eaters we met earlier, have receptors that bind specifically to the stems of antibodies. So when a macrophage comes across a bacterium that is coated in antibodies, it grabs onto those stems and pulls the bacterium in for destruction. The antibody has flagged the germ. It has made it more visible, more appetizing, more obvious to the cells that do the actual eating. This process is called opsonization, a technical word that simply means making something tasty for a phagocyte, but you do not need to remember the word. You only need the image, a germ covered in tiny Y-shaped tags, being gently gathered up by a macrophage that recognizes the tags. Antibodies can also do something else that is quite elegant. They can clump germs together. Because each antibody has two arms, it can bind to two antigens at once. If those antigens are on two different bacteria, the antibody can link them, like a tiny rope tying two boats together. Many antibodies can do this at once, and the result is a tangled clump of bacteria, all stuck together, unable to move or divide or spread. This clump is then much easier for a macrophage to find and swallow in one go. It is the difference between trying to pick up a handful of loose marbles versus picking up a cluster of marbles that have been glued together. The antibody does the gluing, the macrophage does the picking up. There is also a third trick that antibodies can perform, and this one is particularly important against viruses and certain bacteria that produce toxins. By binding to the surface of a virus particle, an antibody can physically block the part of the virus that it uses to attach to and enter your cells. It is as if the virus has a key of its own, a key that fits into a lock on the surface of a human cell. If an antibody gets there first, it covers the virus's key, so the key can no longer fit into the lock. The virus is neutralized, not because it has been destroyed, but because it has been blocked, rendered unable to infect. The same principle applies to bacterial toxins. An antibody can bind to the toxin molecule and cover its active part, turning a dangerous molecule into a harmless one. All of this comes back to shape. It is all just the fit of one surface against another, the quiet, physical reality of molecules bumping into each other and sticking. Now, all of this antibody production takes time, as we have said. The first time your body encounters a new germ, the B cell that can make the right antibody is rare. Maybe only a handful of cells in the whole body. It takes days for that cell to find its antigen, wake up, divide into a large enough population, and start pumping out antibodies. During those days, the germ has time to multiply and spread, and you feel ill. But once the antibody factories are running at full capacity, they can produce a huge number of antibodies. A single plasma cell, which is the fully mature, antibody factory version of a B cell, can produce thousands of antibodies per second. Thousands, every second. And these antibodies flood the blood and the lymph and the tissue fluid, finding their targets, tagging them, clumping them, neutralizing them. The tide turns, the infection clears, and then, when it is over, most of the plasma cells die. But some of the B cells that were activated do not become plasma cells at all. They become memory B cells, as we touched on in the last section. And these memory B cells are the reason the second response is so much faster. They have already been through the waking up process. Their receptors have been fine-tuned through a process of mutation and selection that happens inside the lymph nodes to fit the antigen even better than the original receptor did. They are sitting there, in the lymph nodes and the spleen, just waiting. If the same antigen appears again, they do not need days. They can turn into plasma cells within hours. And the antibodies they make are better antibodies, tighter fitting, more effective. The second response is not just faster, it is also higher quality. The body has learned, and it has improved. This is the quiet, molecular elegance of the adaptive immune system. It is a system that generates randomness, selects what works, refines it, and remembers it. It is a system that can distinguish between two almost identical shapes, because a single atom out of place can change the shape of the binding pocket enough that the key no longer fits. It is a system that can respond to a germ it has never seen before, given enough time, and then respond to that same germ so quickly the second time that you never even know you were exposed. All of this is happening in the fluid spaces of your body, in the lymph nodes under your jaw and in your armpits, in the spleen under your left ribs, in the bone marrow deep inside your bones. And it is happening right now, in the quiet of the night, as you lie still and listen to these words. You can picture the antibodies, if you like, as tiny, Y-shaped shapes drifting in the dark of your bloodstream. They are small beyond imagining. A single drop of blood contains many trillions of them, a number so large it has no real meaning in everyday life. Each one has its own unique binding site, its own little pocket waiting for the right shape to come along. Most of them will drift for their whole short lifespan, a few weeks at most, and never find a match. They will be broken down, their parts recycled, new antibodies made to replace them. But a few will find their lock. A few will click into place, and when they do, the quiet machinery of tagging and clumping and neutralizing will begin, all without a sound, all without a conscious thought, all in the deep, dark, wet interior of the body that is you. And it is worth pausing for just a moment longer on the sheer scale of this shape library that you carry. The immune system can make antibodies that fit antigens that do not even exist in nature. It can make antibodies that fit synthetic molecules invented in a laboratory, molecules that no living thing has ever encountered before. This tells us something important. The variety is not pre-programmed for the germs that exist in the world. It is random. It is generated by shuffling and mixing gene segments in a process that happens as each B cell develops, creating a unique receptor out of a combinatorial set of pieces. Because the process is random, the resulting shapes are random. The library includes keys for locks that have never existed and may never exist. It is a bet, placed billions of times over, that whatever shape comes along, one of the keys in the drawer will fit it. And the bet almost always pays off. This is not design, it is not foresight. It is the quiet power of large numbers, of randomness, of selection. The system generates variety, and then lets the world sort out which varieties are useful. The useful ones are kept. The rest fade away. It is a gentle, ongoing process of trial and memory that has been running since before you were born, and that will run until your last day. So as you lie here, drifting closer to sleep, you can let go of any need to understand every detail. You can simply hold onto the central image, a lock and a key, a shape and a matching shape, a B cell with a receptor and an antigen that fits it, an antibody in the blood, and a germ that it can tag. The whole adaptive system, for all its complexity, comes down to this simple, restful idea of fit. Things fit or they do not fit. The body can tell the difference, and it remembers. The shapes are stored, the memory is written. The keys are hanging on their hooks, waiting for a lock that may never come again, but if it does, the key will be ready, the turn will be swift, and the door will close, gently, quietly, on the germ that thought it could slip past. But for now, no doors are opening, no new locks have appeared. The system is at peace, and you can be at peace with it. The keys are still, the locks are quiet, and the body, in its endless patience, rests. The keys are still, the locks are quiet, and the body, in its endless patience, rests. But there is a way, a very clever and gentle way, that we can give the immune system a new key without ever letting the real lock appear. We can show it a picture of the lock. We can let it practice on something that looks like the germ but cannot cause the illness. This is the quiet, careful idea at the heart of vaccination, and it is one of the most peaceful things the immune system can do. It learns, it prepares, it remembers, all without ever having to fight a real battle. Let us go back for a moment to the memory cells, those long-lived B cells and T cells that remain after an infection is over. They are the reason you do not get sick from the same germ twice, or if you do, the second illness is so mild you barely notice it. The memory cells are already primed. They already know the shape of the antigen. They can jump into action within hours instead of days, and they can produce antibodies that are better, tighter fitting, more effective than the ones made the first time around. This is a natural process, a gift that the body gives itself after surviving an infection, but the cost of that gift is the illness itself. The first time, you have to endure the fever, the aches, the tiredness, the days of feeling unwell. What if there were a way to get the memory without paying that cost? What if you could show the immune system the shape of the key without ever giving it a working copy of the lock? That is what a vaccine does. A vaccine is, at its simplest, a training tool. It is a way of introducing the immune system to an antigen in a form that cannot cause the full disease. The antigen is the important part. Remember, the immune system does not need to see the whole germ. It only needs to see the identifying markers, the antigens, the shapes on the surface that B cells and T cells can recognize. If you can deliver those antigens to the body in a safe way, the immune system will do the rest. It will find the B cells and T cells that have matching receptors. It will activate them. They will divide, produce antibodies, and then, when the job is done, settle into memory. The whole learning process unfolds exactly as it would during a real infection, except that the germ is not present, not in its dangerous form. It is a fire drill. It is a rehearsal. The alarm goes off, the defenders gather, they practice their response, and then they go back to waiting, but now they have a new key on their ring, a key they did not have before. There are several different ways to make a vaccine, and they all follow this same basic principle. Some vaccines contain a whole germ that has been killed or inactivated, treated with heat or chemicals so that it can no longer reproduce or cause illness, but its antigens are still intact. The immune system sees the dead germ, recognizes the antigens, and builds a response. Other vaccines contain a live germ that has been weakened, grown in a laboratory for many generations until it has lost the ability to cause serious disease in a healthy person. This weakened germ can still infect cells and replicate a little, which gives the immune system a more realistic practice session, but it is so tame that the body clears it easily, often without any symptoms at all. Still, other vaccines do not use a whole germ at all. They use only a piece of the germ, a single protein, a single antigen, that is produced in a laboratory and purified. This piece is enough. The B cells see it, the T cells see it, and the memory is formed. There is even a newer kind of vaccine that does not deliver the antigen itself at all. Instead, it delivers a set of instructions, a small piece of genetic material called messenger RNA that tells your own cells to make the antigen for a little while. Your cells become the factories, producing copies of the germ's identifying marker, displaying them on their surfaces, and letting the immune system practice on them. After a short time, the instructions break down, the cells stop making the antigen, and the immune system is left with the memory. The principle is the same in every case. Show the shape. Let the body learn the shape. Keep the memory. When you receive a vaccine, the injection itself is a small event, a brief, mild discomfort in the arm. But beneath the skin, in the muscle where the vaccine was placed, a quiet but very active process begins. The muscle cells or the immune cells in the area pick up the vaccine material. If there is an antigen, it is captured and carried through the lymphatic vessels to the nearest lymph node, often in the armpit. There, it is presented to the waiting B cells and T cells. The search begins. Among the billions of lymphocytes, a few will have receptors that fit this new antigen. They bind, they wake up, they begin to divide. The lymph node becomes a busy training center, filling with dividing cells, just as it would during a real infection, though usually on a smaller, quieter scale. This is why the lymph node in the armpit can sometimes feel a little tender after a vaccine. It is not a bad sign. It is the sign that the training is underway, that the cells are multiplying, that the body is learning. Meanwhile, the innate system has also noticed the vaccine. The injection itself is a tiny injury, and the vaccine material often contains ingredients called adjuvants, a word that simply means helpers, which are designed to gently wake up the innate immune cells. These adjuvants might be small particles of aluminum salts or other molecules that create a mild, local inflammation. This inflammation serves a purpose. It draws macrophages and neutrophils to the site, and it sends chemical signals that help activate the adaptive cells. It makes the training more effective, and it is this mild innate response that causes the familiar side effects of vaccination. The sore arm, the slight redness and warmth at the injection site are the signs of local inflammation, the blood vessels widening, the fluid bringing immune cells to the area. The tiredness, the mild headache, the slight fever that some people feel in the day or two after a vaccine are the body-wide effects of the chemical signals released during the training. They are the same signals that cause the aches and tiredness of a real infection, but much milder and shorter-lived. They are not the illness, they are the body practicing, the body rehearsing, the body going through the motions of defense without a real enemy to fight. This is a way to reframe the experience of a sore arm or a tired day after a vaccine. It is not a side effect in the sense of something gone wrong. It is evidence that the immune system has noticed the training material and is taking it seriously. It is the innate system doing its job, calling attention to the site, while the adaptive system does its slower, more careful work of finding the right B cells and T cells and building the memory. The mild discomfort is the price of the rehearsal, and it is a small price, measured in hours or a day or two, compared to the days or weeks of a real illness, and the payoff is lasting. The memory cells remain. The antibodies are ready. The next time the real germ arrives, the body will not need to start from scratch. It will remember. It is worth pausing here to appreciate the quiet, cumulative effect of this process across a whole population. When many people in a community have memory cells against a particular germ, that germ has a much harder time spreading. It runs into immune people, one after another, and cannot find enough vulnerable hosts to keep its chain of transmission going. This is the principle of herd immunity, a term that simply means the group as a whole is protected because enough individuals are immune. It is a form of collective rest, a shared quiet, a shelter built from the combined memories of many bodies. Even those who cannot be vaccinated because they are too young or too ill or their immune systems do not work properly benefit from the immunity of those around them. The germ cannot reach them because the people around them block its path. It is a gentle, communal form of defense, a wall made not of stone but of memory cells, a wall that protects the most vulnerable by the simple fact that the people near them have already learned the shape of the threat. And so, as you lie here, you can consider the possibility that your own body carries some of these trained memories, these quiet preparations that were put in place without a real illness ever having occurred. Perhaps you received vaccines as a child, a series of small injections that you do not even remember, and your body learned the shapes of several dangerous germs before you ever encountered them. Perhaps you have had boosters later in life, reminders that refresh the memory cells, that wake them up and make them divide again so the population stays strong. All of this learning is stored in you, in the resting B cells and T cells of your lymph nodes and your spleen. It is a library of keys that was built, in part, by deliberate, gentle training, by showing the body what to watch for without making it suffer first. It is a gift you were given, perhaps without ever thinking about it, a gift that keeps giving every day, that you do not get sick from a germ that might once have been a serious threat. The process is so elegant, so quiet, so aligned with the body's own natural way of learning, that it is easy to take it for granted. But if you pause and picture it, it is a restful thing to imagine, a small injection, a local gathering of cells, a message carried through the lymph, a search among billions of lymphocytes, a match found, a division and a production of antibodies, and then, at the end, a settling into memory. All of this happens without the conscious mind ever being involved. The body learns on its own, in its own time, using its own ancient mechanisms. The vaccine just provides the shape. The body does all the rest. It is a collaboration between human cleverness and the deep old wisdom of the cells, a collaboration that has saved more lives than can easily be counted, and that continues, quietly, in clinics and pharmacies and doctors' offices every day, a steady, gentle building of memory across the world. And now, as you drift further into the soft edge of sleep, you can rest in the thought that your body knows how to do this. It knows how to learn from a safe picture. It knows how to practice without getting hurt. It knows how to keep a key for a lifetime, hanging on its hook, waiting for a door that may never open. And if that door does open, if the real lock ever appears, the key will turn so quickly, so smoothly, that you may never even feel the breeze. The training has been done, the rehearsal is complete, the memory is in place, and the body, in its quiet competence, is ready. But readiness is not the whole story. There is a deeper question to ask, a question about where all these cells come from in the first place, where they are born, and how they are trained to tell the difference between the body's own locks and the locks of the outside world. That is a journey inward, into the soft centers of bones and a small gland in the chest, and it is the next quiet step we will take. For now, the training is done, the keys are cut, and all is well. The training is done, the keys are cut, and all is well. But we have been talking about these cells, the macrophages, the neutrophils, the B cells, the T cells, as if they simply exist, as if they have always been there, fully formed and ready. They have not. Every one of these defender cells began its life somewhere, was built from raw materials, was shaped and trained and tested before it was ever allowed to circulate through your blood and your lymph. And the places where this building and training happen are quiet, hidden workshops deep inside the body, places you would never think to look, places that work without rest, day and night, from before you were born until your very last moment. This is the section where we go inward, into the soft centers of bones and a small gland in the chest, and we watch, very gently, as the defenders are made. Every blood cell in your body, red or white, begins in the same place. It begins in the bone marrow. Bone marrow is the soft, spongy tissue that fills the hollow centers of your larger bones. If you have ever seen a bone, perhaps from a meal, you may have noticed a darker, softer material inside the hard white outer shell. That is the marrow. In a living body, it is not dry or brittle. It is a thick, rich, red or yellowish tissue full of blood vessels, full of cells in every stage of development. It is one of the most active tissues in the body, a factory that never closes. Every second of every day, your bone marrow produces somewhere around 2 to 3 million new red blood cells. And it also produces white blood cells, millions of them, of all the different types we have met and more. The marrow is the nursery, the birthplace, the starting point for the entire cellular defense system. Inside the marrow, there are special cells called stem cells. A stem cell is a kind of blank slate, a cell that has not yet decided what it will become. It can divide and make more copies of itself, or it can take a first step down a particular path, becoming a cell that is destined to turn into a red blood cell, or a platelet, or one of several kinds of white blood cells. This first step is like choosing a branch in a very large, very old tree. Once the step is taken, the cell is committed. It will now divide and mature along that branch, guided by chemical signals, by growth factors, by the quiet hum of instructions that the body has been using for hundreds of millions of years. The process is slow and careful. A new red blood cell takes about a week to mature. A new neutrophil takes about 2 weeks. Other cells take longer. All the while, they are nurtured by the marrow's supportive cells, fed by the blood vessels that run through the marrow, checked for errors, and, if they are too flawed, quietly dismantled before they are ever released. The cells of the innate immune system, the ones we met first, are born and mature entirely in the bone marrow. Macrophages start their lives there as cells called monocytes, which are released into the blood and then migrate into the tissues, where they settle down and become the big eaters we know. Neutrophils are born and mature in the marrow and then released directly into the blood, fully armed for their short, intense lives. The same is true for several other innate cell types we have not spent time on, like eosinophils and basophils, which play roles in defending against parasites and in allergic reactions. The marrow is the constant, steady source of all these cells, the wellspring from which the innate defense flows. But the cells of the adaptive system, the B cells and T cells, have a more complex journey. B cells are born in the bone marrow and also mature there. The B in B cell actually stands for bone marrow, or more precisely for an organ in birds called the bursa of Fabricius, where they were first discovered, but the useful memory trick is that B cells come from the bone marrow. In the marrow, the developing B cell goes through the random shuffling of gene segments that creates its unique receptor, its unique key shape. This process happens without any reference to the outside world. The marrow does not know what germs you will encounter. It simply generates variety, as much variety as it can, cutting and pasting gene segments in different combinations, so that each new B cell has a slightly different receptor shape. By the time a B cell is mature and ready to leave the marrow, it carries on its surface a single, specific antibody shape, a key that has never been tried in a lock, a shape that has never been tested against the world. It is a fresh key, newly cut, and it enters the blood and the lymph with no idea what it might one day fit. T cells are also born in the bone marrow, but they do not mature there. Their name comes from the place where they go to finish their training, a small gland in the chest called the thymus. The thymus is a soft, pinkish-gray organ that sits just behind the breastbone, in front of the heart. It is largest in childhood, when the immune system is learning the shapes of the world for the very first time, and it slowly shrinks with age, replaced bit by bit with fat. By the time a person is elderly, the thymus is much smaller than it once was, but it never disappears entirely. Even in old age, it continues to produce a small number of new T cells, a quiet trickle of fresh defenders that carries on until the very end of life. The journey of a young T cell, from the bone marrow to the thymus, is a slow migration through the blood. The cell is not yet a true T cell. It is a precursor, an immature cell that has not yet built its receptor. When it arrives in the thymus, it settles into the outer part of the gland, called the cortex, and there it begins to grow and change. Like the B cell in the marrow, it shuffles its gene segments to create a unique receptor shape. But the T cell receptor is slightly different from the B cell receptor. It is not an antibody. It is a related but distinct kind of protein, and it will later recognize antigens not as free-floating molecules, but as pieces displayed on the surface of other cells. The random shuffling in the thymus generates an enormous variety of T cell receptors, just as the marrow generates an enormous variety of B cell receptors. The principle is the same: generate diversity, and let selection sort out the useful from the useless. But the thymus does something more than just generate diversity. It tests the T cells, and this testing is one of the most remarkable and essential processes in the entire immune system. It is a process of education, a careful screening that ensures the T cells can do two things. First, They must be able to recognize the body's own display molecules, the molecules that present antigens. If a T cell receptor cannot bind to these display molecules at all, it is useless. It will never be able to see an antigen, because antigens are only shown on these molecules. So the thymus presents the developing T cells with the body's own display molecules, and it checks, can you see them? If the answer is no, the cell is allowed to die. It is a necessary culling, a removal of the cells that cannot do the basic job. The second test is even more important. The T cell must not react too strongly to the body's own antigens. The thymus takes the extraordinary step of displaying to the developing T cells a wide array of the body's own proteins, the self-antigens, the molecules that belong to you. It is as if the thymus holds up a series of photographs and says to each young T cell, "Do you see this? Is this something you would attack?" If a T cell binds too tightly to a self-antigen, if it shows signs that it would attack the body's own tissues, it is destroyed. This process is called negative selection, and it is the body's way of building self-tolerance, the ability to coexist peacefully with its own cells. The T cells that pass both tests, they can see the display molecules and they do not attack self-antigens, are allowed to mature and leave the thymus. They enter the blood and the lymph as fully trained but naive T cells, ready to recognize foreign antigens, but tolerant of the body's own. This education is not perfect. Sometimes a self-reactive T cell slips through, and that is part of the story of autoimmune disease, which we will come to in a later section. But the process is remarkably effective. The vast majority of the T cells that leave the thymus are well-behaved, capable, and ready for the quiet work of immune surveillance. The thymus is a busy place in early life. In infancy and childhood, it is churning out new T cells in great numbers, seeding the lymph nodes and the spleen with a diverse population of naive cells, each with its own unique receptor. This is when the library of T cell shapes is first stocked, the shelves filled with keys of every possible cut. As you grow older and the thymus shrinks, the production of new T cells slows down, but the body has a backup plan. The T cells that have already been produced can live for a very long time, years or even decades, slowly dividing to maintain their numbers. And the memory T cells, the ones that have already met their antigen, are especially long-lived. They persist in the tissues and the lymph nodes, quietly waiting for a very long time indeed. So even as the thymus shrinks, the adaptive system continues to function, relying on the library it built in youth, refreshed occasionally by the slow, steady output of the aging thymus. And what of the B cells? They too are tested for self-reactivity, but much of their testing happens in the bone marrow itself, before they are released. Young B cells that react strongly to self-antigens in the marrow are either destroyed or given a chance to edit their receptors, to rearrange their genes again, and try a new shape. This is called receptor editing, and it is a kind of second chance, a way for the body to rescue a cell that would otherwise be lost, by giving it a new key. Only the B cells that pass this testing are allowed to leave the marrow and enter the circulation. Once in the lymph nodes and the spleen, they are further monitored. A B cell that encounters its antigen without the right kind of help from a T cell will be shut down or destroyed. Another layer of safety to prevent the immune system from turning on the body itself. So there is a geography to the immune system, a quiet map of birthplaces and training grounds and meeting places. The bone marrow, deep in the center of your flat bones, your hips, your ribs, your breastbone, your skull, is the nursery, the place of origin for all blood cells, the place where B cells are born and trained, and where the precursors of T cells are generated. The thymus, in the center of your chest, is the school for T cells, the place where they are tested and educated before being released into the wider world. The lymph nodes, scattered along the lymphatic vessels in your neck, your armpits, your groin, your chest, and your abdomen, are the meeting halls, the places where the trained cells gather and wait and encounter whatever antigens the lymph brings them. The spleen, in your upper left abdomen, is the blood filtering station, a backup meeting place and a reservoir of cells. And the blood itself is the highway, the warm, fast-moving river that connects all these places, carrying cells from the marrow to the thymus, from the thymus to the lymph nodes, from the lymph nodes to the tissues, and back again. Right now, as you lie here, all of these places are active. The marrow in your bones is humming with the quiet work of cell division, new neutrophils and monocytes and B cells being born every moment. The thymus, whatever its size at your age, is doing its slow, patient work of T-cell education. The lymph nodes are filtering lymph, their macrophages and dendritic cells presenting antigens to the waiting lymphocytes. The spleen is filtering blood, removing old red cells, holding its reservoir of defenders, and the blood is carrying all of these cells, millions upon millions of them, in a constant, gentle circulation. The geography of your immune system is not a static map. It is a living, breathing landscape, a network of places with specific purposes, all working together in a quiet, coordinated rhythm that never stops. And you can picture this geography, if you like, as you drift deeper into rest. You can bring your attention very softly to the center of your chest, where the thymus sits, a small gland that shaped the T cells that protect you. You can bring your attention to your hips, to your ribs, to the long bones of your legs, where the marrow lives, warm and red and productive. You can imagine the cells that are being born there right now, new and fresh, with their randomly generated keys that will one day, perhaps, fit a lock you have not yet encountered. You can feel, in a quiet and indirect way, the hum of this internal industry, the constant, gentle making of defenders, the quiet training, the careful testing. You are not just a body lying in the dark. You are a workshop. You are a school. You are a library. And all of it, every part of it, is working in perfect silence, asking nothing of your conscious mind, needing only the steady flow of blood and the oxygen it carries, which your slow, even breathing is providing right now, breath after breath after breath. The factories are running, the school is in session, and the defenders, fresh and ready, are taking their places in the quiet watch. The factories are running, the school is in session, and the defenders, fresh and ready, are taking their places in the quiet watch. But sometimes, the watch makes a mistake. Not a mistake of weakness, not a failure to respond, but a mistake of overreaction. It sees a shape, a lock, and it cuts a key that fits it, and it sounds the alarm, and it brings all the forces of inflammation and antibodies and memory to bear, just as it should. But the lock it has seen does not belong to a germ. It belongs to something harmless, a bit of pollen drifting in the spring air, a protein in a peanut, the dust from a cat's skin, a molecule in milk or shellfish or a bee's venom. The immune system has identified a threat where no threat exists. And this is the quiet, calm story of allergies. An allergy is not a failure of the immune system in the sense of something being broken. It is the immune system working exactly as it was designed to work, but aimed at the wrong target. The machinery is intact. The process is the same. An antigen enters the body, and for some people, for reasons that are only partly understood, the immune system treats that antigen not as a harmless visitor, but as a dangerous invader. It builds antibodies against it. It creates memory cells, and then, on the next encounter, those memory cells spring into action, and the response is swift and strong. The only problem is that the target is not a germ. It is something that, for most people, causes no reaction at all. Let us slow this down and walk through it step by step, because the process is the same one we have already learned, just directed at a peaceful target. The first time a person who will become allergic encounters the substance, let us say it is pollen from a particular tree, nothing obvious happens. The pollen grains land on the moist lining of the nose or the eyes. The innate immune system notices them, but not in a dramatic way. However, in this person, for reasons we will touch on in a moment, the adaptive immune system takes a particular interest. B cells with receptors that fit some protein in the pollen bind to that protein, become activated, and, with help from T cells, begin to produce antibodies. But in an allergy, the antibodies produced are of a specific type, a type called immunoglobulin E, or IgE for short. This is a class of antibody that, in the normal course of things, is used to defend against parasites, against worms and other large invaders that are too big for macrophages to eat. But in an allergic person, IgE is made against the pollen protein instead. These IgE antibodies do not float freely in the blood the way other antibodies do, not for long. They are quickly captured by another kind of cell, a cell called a mast cell. Mast cells are stationed in the tissues, particularly in the skin, the lining of the nose and throat, the lungs, and the gut. They are packed with tiny granules, little packets filled with a chemical called histamine, among other things. The mast cell grabs the IgE antibodies and holds them on its surface, with the binding arms pointing outward, like a cluster of sensors waiting for a specific shape. And then the mast cell waits. It may wait for days, or months, or years. The person who has been sensitized to the pollen feels nothing during this waiting period. The mast cells are loaded, the IgE is in place, but the trigger has not been pulled. Then comes the second exposure. The pollen season returns. The grains land again on the nose or the eyes. And this time, the pollen proteins encounter the IgE antibodies sitting on the mast cells. When the antigen binds to the IgE, it cross-links two adjacent antibodies, pulling them together. This is the signal. The mast cell responds by releasing its granules, dumping histamine and other chemicals into the surrounding tissue. And this is where the familiar sensations of allergy come from. Histamine makes the small blood vessels widen and become leaky, leading to redness and swelling. It makes the smooth muscles in the airways contract, which can make breathing feel tight. It stimulates the nerve endings, causing itching and sneezing. All of these effects are the body's attempt to expel the invader, to flush it out, to sneeze it away, to wash it out with watery eyes and a runny nose. The response is local, fast, and, in mild cases, just uncomfortable. It is the immune system doing exactly what it would do to a germ at the body's surface, but the trigger is a harmless piece of plant protein. The same process can happen with foods, with medicines, with insect stings, with latex, with almost any protein the body can encounter. In each case, the immune system has made IgE against a harmless substance, and mast cells have been armed with that IgE, and the next encounter triggers the release of histamine. The location of the reaction depends on where the allergen enters the body. Pollen lands in the nose and eyes, so the reaction is sneezing, itching, watery eyes. A food allergen is swallowed, so the reaction may be tingling in the mouth, swelling of the throat, or later, nausea or hives. A bee sting injects venom directly into the skin, so the reaction is localized swelling and redness that can spread. The pattern is the same, the trigger is different. The body's response is identical in its mechanism, but the context makes it a problem rather than a protection. One of the quiet mysteries of allergies is that they can change over a person's lifetime. A child who is allergic to milk or eggs may, as they grow, lose that allergy entirely. An adult who has never had a problem with pollen may, in their 30s or 40s, begin to develop hay fever each spring. A person who has eaten shellfish for years with no trouble may, one day, have a reaction to it and remain allergic for the rest of their life. The immune system is not static. It is constantly learning, constantly adjusting, and sometimes, for reasons that are not fully understood, it shifts its posture. It begins to see a threat where it saw none before, or it stops seeing a threat where it once saw one. This shift is not a failure of the body. It is evidence that the immune system is a living, changing system, one that is shaped by experience, by environment, by the body's own internal state, and by factors that are still being gently investigated by researchers. Why do some people develop allergies and others do not? The honest answer, and the restful one, is that we do not fully know. There is a tendency for allergies to run in families, which suggests that genetics plays a role. If one parent has allergies, the child is somewhat more likely to have them. If both parents have allergies, the likelihood is higher still. But genes are not the whole story. The environment matters too. Children who grow up on farms, who are exposed to a wide variety of animals and dust and soil, tend to have lower rates of allergies than children who grow up in very clean urban environments. This has led to a general idea called the hygiene hypothesis, which suggests, very broadly, that the immune system needs to be educated by a certain amount of exposure to the microbial world in early life, and that without this education, it may be more likely to turn its attention to harmless targets. But this is a hypothesis, a gentle, ongoing area of study, not a settled fact. The real picture is likely more complex, involving the timing of exposures, the mix of bacteria in the gut, viral infections in childhood, diet, and factors we have not yet named. The not knowing is part of the landscape. It is a quiet, open question, and it is perfectly fine to sit with that question without needing a firm answer. What is known is that the reaction itself, once triggered, can range from very mild to very strong. A mild reaction might be a few sneezes, a slight itch, a small patch of redness. A stronger reaction might involve more widespread swelling, more intense itching, a feeling of tightness in the throat or chest. And in some people, the reaction can be severe enough to involve the whole body, a condition called anaphylaxis, which is a word that describes a rapid, widespread release of histamine and other chemicals, leading to a drop in blood pressure and difficulty breathing. This is serious, and it requires immediate medical attention. But dwelling on the details of severe reactions is not restful, and there is no need to do so here. The point is simply that the immune system, when its alarm is set too loud, can cause real problems, and people who live with severe allergies learn to manage them with care and with the help of medicines that calm the storm. Those medicines are part of the same quiet story. Antihistamines, as the name suggests, block the action of histamine. They fit into the same receptors on cells that histamine would bind to, but they do not activate them. They are like a key that fits into the lock but does not turn it, preventing the real key from getting in. By blocking histamine, these medicines reduce the swelling, the itching, the sneezing, the redness. They calm the response without shutting down the immune system as a whole. They are a gentle intervention, a way of telling the body, it is all right, this is not a threat, you can stand down. And in most cases of mild allergy, they work very well, allowing the person to go about their day with the pollen season, or the cat dander, or the dust mite particles simply fading into the background where they belong. There is also a longer-term approach, a kind of quiet retraining of the immune system called immunotherapy. The principle is simple and elegant. A person is given very small, gradually increasing doses of the allergen over a long period of time, sometimes months or years. The doses are too small to trigger a full allergic reaction, but they are enough to be noticed by the immune system. Over time, the immune system can shift its response. Instead of making IgE against the allergen, it may begin to make a different class of antibody, called IgG, which does not arm mast cells and does not trigger histamine release. The immune system learns, slowly, to see the allergen as a normal part of the environment, not as a threat. It is a kind of gentle, patient retraining, a way of turning down the volume on the alarm. It does not work for everyone, and it does not work for every type of allergy, but it is a quiet reminder that the immune system can learn to be calmer, just as it once learned to be loud. So, as you lie here, you can think of allergies not as a flaw in the body, but as a case of the body's defense system being too diligent, too watchful, too ready to protect. It sees a shape, and it cannot help but respond. The shape is not dangerous, but the body does not know that. It only knows the shape. It only knows the fit. The lock and key system we talked about earlier is so central, so powerful, that it can be triggered by anything with the right molecular contour, whether that contour belongs to a germ or to a grain of pollen, or to a protein in a strawberry. The system is not wise. It is not thoughtful in the way a conscious mind is thoughtful. It is a pattern-matching machine, and it matches patterns. Sometimes it matches a pattern that it would be better to ignore. And when it does, the alarm sounds, and the body sneezes, and the eyes water, and the skin itches, and then, often, the moment passes, and the quiet returns. The quiet returns. That is the restful part. Even in an allergic response, the body eventually calms down, the histamine is broken down, the mast cells reset, the inflammation fades, the tissues return to their resting state. The immune system is not permanently stuck in alarm. It is designed to have an off switch, to resolve the response, to return to baseline. The sneezing stops, the itching fades, and the body, once again, is still. The keys are still on their hooks, even the IgE keys. The mast cells are still in their stations, even if they are loaded. And the person, the whole person lying in the dark, can breathe and can rest, and can know that the immune system, for all its occasional overreactions, is always seeking balance. It is always working its way back to quiet. The alarm may be too loud sometimes, but it does not ring forever. It winds down, it settles, and the body, in its endless, patient wisdom, waits for the next breath, the next moment, the next gentle drift towards sleep. The watch continues, but the watch is calm. And the calm is what we hold on to, now, as we move softly toward the next quiet question, the question of what happens when the immune system turns its keys not against harmless things from outside, but against the body's own cells, the locks that belong to the self. That is a deeper kind of mistake, and it is a story we will approach with the same gentle care, the same slow pace, the same refusal to be alarmed. But for now, the allergies are understood, the alarm is recognized, and the quiet is here, in this room, in this breath, in this moment. The quiet is here, in this room, in this breath, in this moment. And now we approach a deeper kind of mistake, one that is not about an outside substance being misread as a threat, but about the body misreading itself. This is the quiet, careful story of autoimmunity, the set of conditions where the immune system, which has spent its whole existence learning to tell self from other, makes an error in that most fundamental distinction. It turns its keys against the body's own locks. It sees a shape on the surface of a healthy cell, a shape that belongs to the body itself, and it treats that shape as an antigen. It builds antibodies against it. It activates T cells against it. It mounts a defense where no defense is needed, against the very tissues it is meant to protect. This is a hard thing to understand at first, because we have spent so much time describing the careful education of the immune system, the way the thymus tests T cells and the bone marrow tests B cells, to make sure they do not react to self-antigens. That education is real, and it works remarkably well. For most people, most of the time, the immune system coexists peacefully with the body's own cells. It moves past them without reacting. It recognizes them as part of the landscape, as the normal, expected background of molecules that make up a human being. But the education is not perfect. A few self-reactive cells can slip through. And the body has other layers of control, other ways of keeping these cells quiet, ways that usually work. But sometimes, in some people, those controls fail. A self-reactive B cell or T cell becomes activated. It begins to divide. It begins to produce antibodies that bind to a normal part of the body. And once that process starts, it can be very hard to stop. The immune system, as we have seen, is designed to amplify a response once it gets going. It is designed to remember. And those features, so valuable when the target is a germ, become a problem when the target is the self. The conditions that result from this mistake are called autoimmune diseases. The word simply means immunity against the self. There are many different kinds, because the immune system can mistakenly target many different parts of the body. The symptoms depend on which tissue is being attacked. If the immune system targets the lining of the joints, the result is a condition called rheumatoid arthritis, where the joints become swollen, warm, tender, and stiff, the classic signs of inflammation, but directed at the body's own joint tissue. If it targets the skin and other organs, the result can be a condition called lupus, a word that means wolf in Latin, named for the characteristic rash that can appear across the cheeks and nose. If it targets the cells in the pancreas that make insulin, the hormone that controls blood sugar, the result is type 1 diabetes, where the body can no longer produce enough insulin and must rely on injections to manage blood sugar levels. These are just a few examples. There are many others, each involving a different self-antigen, a different lock that the immune system has mistakenly learned to attack. The process, at the cellular level, is very similar to what we have already described. In rheumatoid arthritis, for example, the immune system produces antibodies that bind to proteins in the joint lining. These antibodies form complexes with their antigens, and these complexes settle in the joints, triggering inflammation. Macrophages and neutrophils are called in. They release enzymes and reactive molecules meant to destroy germs, but here they are directed at the body's own cartilage and bone. Over time, the persistent inflammation can erode the joint, causing damage that accumulates. The body is, in a very real sense, trying to heal an infection that is not there, and in doing so, it is hurting itself. The inflammation is not a sign of a germ, it is a sign of a misdirected response. But the redness, the warmth, the swelling, the soreness are all the same. The innate system cannot tell the difference between a legitimate call for help and a mistaken one. It simply responds to the signals it receives. Lupus is more wide-ranging, because the self-antigens targeted in lupus are found in the nucleus of cells, the central compartment where the DNA is stored. These nuclear antigens are released when cells die, and in lupus, the immune system has made antibodies against them. These antibodies form complexes that can lodge in the skin, the kidneys, the joints, the lining of the heart and lungs, causing inflammation wherever they settle. The disease can flare up and then quiet down, and the pattern of flares and remissions is different for each person. It is a condition that moves in waves, and living with it means learning to ride those waves, to rest when the inflammation is active, and to live fully when it is quiet. Type 1 diabetes is a slightly different story, because it is primarily driven by T cells rather than antibodies. The T cells mistakenly recognize antigens on the insulin-producing beta cells of the pancreas. They infiltrate the pancreatic tissue and destroy those cells, one by one, in a slow, quiet process that can take months or years before symptoms appear. By the time the diagnosis is made, a large fraction of the beta cells are already gone. The body cannot make enough insulin, blood sugar rises, and the person must take insulin from outside to replace what the immune system has taken away. It is a lifelong condition, managed with careful attention, but the root cause is the same as in other autoimmune diseases. The immune system has misidentified a part of the body as foreign. Why does this happen? Why, after all the careful screening in the thymus and the bone marrow, after all the layers of regulation, does the immune system sometimes turn inward? The plain, calm, honest answer is that we do not fully know. Scientists have been studying autoimmune diseases for a very long time, and they have learned a great deal about the details of which antigens are targeted, which genes make a person more susceptible, and which environmental factors might trigger the onset. But the complete picture, the full chain of cause and effect, is still not clear. This not knowing is not a cause for alarm. It is simply where the science stands, a quiet, open question at the edge of our understanding. What is known is that there is a genetic component. Autoimmune diseases tend to run in families, though not in a simple, predictable way. A person may inherit a set of genes that makes their immune system slightly more likely to become confused, slightly more prone to letting a self-reactive cell slip through or become activated. The genes that are most often involved are the very same genes that code for the display molecules on cells, the molecules that present antigens to T cells. Certain versions of these genes seem to be better at presenting self-antigens in a way that looks foreign, or less good at keeping self-reactive T cells under control. But having these genes is not enough on its own. Many people carry the genes and never develop an autoimmune disease. Something else must happen, some trigger, some event that tips the balance. That trigger might be an infection. It is a quiet paradox that a germ, which the immune system is designed to fight, can sometimes set off a response that ends up attacking the body. The way this can happen is through a process called molecular mimicry, a term that simply means a germ has a protein on its surface that looks very similar, in shape, to a protein in the human body. The immune system mounts a response to the germ, producing antibodies and T cells that fit the germ's antigen. But because that antigen is so similar to a self-antigen, the same antibodies and T cells also bind to the body's own tissues. The germ is cleared, but the immune response does not shut off completely because the self-antigen is still there, still stimulating the cells, still looking like a threat. The germ is gone, but the confusion remains. Other triggers may include tissue damage from an injury, which releases self-antigens in large amounts and in an inflammatory context that wakes up the immune system in a way that normal, quiet cell turnover does not. Hormones may play a role, which could explain why many autoimmune diseases are more common in women than in men. The gut microbiome, the community of bacteria that lives in the intestines, may also be involved, helping to educate the immune system in ways that, when disrupted, could lead to autoimmunity. And there are likely triggers we have not yet identified, factors in the environment, in the diet, in the complex web of modern life, that nudge the immune system just slightly off course. All of this is said not to provide a clear answer, but to acknowledge the depth of the question. The immune system is so complex, so finely balanced, that a small shift in one part of the system can have effects that ripple outward. The line between self and other is not a hard, bright line. It is a gradient, a negotiation, a conversation that is happening constantly in the lymph nodes and the spleen and the tissues. Autoimmunity happens when that conversation goes wrong, when the immune system stops listening to the signals that say, "This is you, this is fine, this is not a threat." And once the conversation breaks down, it is hard to restart it. The memory cells are already there. The antibodies are already being made. The inflammation is already underway. But the story is not a hopeless one. Far from it. Medicine has found ways to calm the autoimmune response, to quiet the inflammation, to give the body back some of the peace it has lost. Many of these treatments work by gently suppressing parts of the immune system, turning down the volume on the response without turning it off entirely. Others work by blocking specific chemical signals, specific cytokines, that drive the inflammation in a particular disease. Still others work by depleting the B cells or T cells that are causing the problem, giving the body a fresh start, a chance to rebuild its immune repertoire without the self-reactive cells. These treatments are not cures in most cases. They are management. They are a way of living with a system that has made a mistake, of gently correcting that mistake day by day, year by year. And many people with autoimmune diseases live full, rich lives with the help of these medicines, lives in which the disease is a part of the landscape, but not the whole of it. There is also a quiet, restful truth at the heart of autoimmunity, and it is this: the body is always seeking balance. Even when the immune system has turned inward, the regulatory mechanisms are still there, still trying to restore order. There is a whole class of immune cells called regulatory T cells, whose job is to suppress immune responses, to tell other cells to calm down, to stand down, to stop dividing. These cells are part of the normal immune system, and they are active even in people with autoimmune disease. They are the body's own peacekeepers, its internal voice of quiet. They may be overwhelmed by the strength of the autoimmune response, but they are not gone. They are still trying. And some treatments aim to boost these cells, to give them more power, to help the body restore its own balance, rather than imposing balance from the outside. This is a gentle, ongoing area of research, and it holds a quiet promise. So as you lie here, you can hold autoimmune disease in your thoughts, not as a frightening breakdown, but as a reminder of how delicate and how remarkable the immune system's normal function is. Every day that you do not have an autoimmune reaction, every day that your immune system moves past your own cells without attacking them, is a day that the quiet education of the thymus and the bone marrow has worked. The self-reactive cells were either destroyed or silenced. The regulatory cells did their job. The balance held. This is the normal state of the body, the state it is in right now as you rest. The immune system is not attacking the joints that are resting against the mattress. It is not attacking the skin that feels the soft brush of the sheet. It is not attacking the pancreas or the kidneys or the heart. It is simply watching and recognizing everything it sees as familiar, as self, as safe. That recognition is a quiet, ongoing miracle, a constant act of self-acceptance that unfolds in the blood and the lymph every second of every day. And in this moment, that acceptance is all there is. The keys are not turning in the wrong locks. The T cells are not infiltrating the tissues. The antibodies are not binding to self-antigens. The body is at peace with itself, a whole, integrated system, watching and resting and breathing. The mistakes that can happen, the autoimmunity that some people live with, are a part of the larger story, but they are not the whole story. The whole story is one of balance, of a system that works so well most of the time that we forget it is even there. The whole story is one of quiet, of calm, of a body that knows itself and accepts itself and protects itself without ever raising its voice. And that is the note we will carry forward, the note of quiet acceptance, as we move now toward the final chapters of our tour, toward the deep connection between rest and defense, and toward the open questions that remain, the gentle not knowing that is itself a kind of peace. The body is still, the immune system is calm, and the self is safe within itself, held in the quiet dark, breathing. The body is still, the immune system is calm, and the self is safe within itself, held in the quiet dark, breathing. And now, as we draw near the close of our slow tour, we turn to something that connects everything we have explored directly to you, right now, in this moment. We turn to the relationship between rest and defense, between the act of sleeping and the quiet work of the immune system, because what you are doing right now, simply lying still with your eyes closed, is not separate from the immune processes we have been describing. It is part of them. Sleep is not just a pause in the day. It is an active state, a time when the body shifts its resources, changes its priorities, and supports the very systems we have been talking about. While you sleep, your body is not idle. It is doing a great deal of internal maintenance. The energy that during the day goes toward movement, toward digestion, toward the constant processing of sensory information from the outside world, is redirected. It goes inward, and a portion of that energy goes to the immune system. Certain immune cells are produced in greater numbers during sleep. Certain immune signals are released in higher concentrations. The body uses the quiet hours of rest to tune up its defenses, to replenish its stocks, to prepare for whatever the next day might bring. One of the most consistent findings in the study of sleep and immunity is that the cells of the innate immune system are affected by sleep. Natural killer cells, a type of white blood cell we have not spent much time on, but which are part of the fast, general innate response, are more active after a good night's sleep. These cells, as their name suggests, are specialized in killing cells that have been infected by viruses or that have become cancerous. They patrol the body, checking each cell they pass, and if they find one that is not right, they deliver a signal that tells that cell to dismantle itself. The number and activity of these natural killer cells drop when a person is sleep-deprived. Even a single night of poor sleep can reduce their effectiveness. The body, when it is tired, has fewer of these quiet sentinels on patrol. The adaptive immune system is also influenced by sleep. During deep, slow-wave sleep, the body releases a hormone called growth hormone, which, despite its name, does more than just help children grow. It also supports the production and maintenance of immune cells, and during sleep, the levels of another hormone, cortisol, drop. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and it has a dampening effect on the immune system. It is part of the body's way of keeping inflammation in check. But when cortisol levels are high for too long, as they can be during periods of chronic stress or sleep deprivation, the immune system can be suppressed. The drop in cortisol during sleep allows the immune system to operate more freely, to do its maintenance work without as many chemical breaks being applied. There is also a specific connection between sleep and the formation of immunological memory. We talked earlier about how vaccines work by showing the immune system a safe version of an antigen, allowing it to form memory cells. Some research has shown that the quality of sleep after receiving a vaccine can affect how strong the resulting immune memory is. People who sleep well in the nights after a vaccination tend to produce a stronger, more lasting antibody response than those who are sleep deprived. The process of consolidating memory, which we usually think of in terms of the brain, also happens in the immune system. Sleep helps the body remember the shapes it has learned, just as it helps the brain remember the experiences of the day. The keys are cut more cleanly. The memory cells are laid down more firmly. The library is better organized. Why would the body link sleep and immunity so closely? The answer probably has to do with energy. Mounting an immune response is expensive. Producing millions of new cells, pumping out antibodies, raising a fever, all of these things require a great deal of energy. During the day, that energy is needed for other things, for finding food, for moving, for thinking, for interacting with the world. At night, when those activities are suspended, the body can afford to direct more resources toward internal defense and repair. Sleep is the time when the body can focus on itself, can sweep the floors and repair the walls and restock the armory, without having to also run the complex operations of waking life. And then there is the role of sleep during actual illness. When you are sick, you feel tired, you want to lie down, you want to sleep more than usual. This is not a coincidence. It is part of the immune response. The chemical signals released by immune cells during an infection, the cytokines, act on the brain and promote sleepiness. The body is telling you, in the most direct way it can, to rest, to stop moving, to stop spending energy on anything that is not directly related to fighting the infection. The fatigue of illness is not a sign of weakness. It is a deliberate, evolved strategy. The body knows that sleep will help it recover. It is asking you to cooperate with the defense. So the act of lying here now in the dark, letting your breathing slow and your thoughts soften, is not just a preparation for tomorrow. It is a contribution, right now, to the health of your immune system. Every minute you spend in rest, every minute you drift closer to sleep, is a minute your body can use for the quiet work of maintenance. The macrophages can rest and repair. The natural killer cells can patrol more effectively when you are asleep. The memory cells can settle more firmly into their long-term stations. The cortisol levels can drop, and the growth hormone can rise. The whole system, the whole vast network of cells and signals and barriers we have spent this time exploring, can do its best work while you are not asking anything of it. And you do not need to do anything special to make this happen. You do not need to force yourself to sleep. You do not need to worry about whether you are sleeping well enough or long enough. The body knows how to use whatever rest you give it. Even lying still, even drifting in that soft space between waking and sleeping, is a form of rest that the body appreciates. The immune system is not keeping score. It is not waiting for a perfect night of sleep. It takes what it can get, and it uses it. The simple act of closing your eyes and letting go of the day is a gift you are giving to the trillions of cells that are, at this very moment, watching over you. Think of it this way. All night long, while you are unaware, the bone marrow will be producing new immune cells. The thymus will be doing its quiet work, however small it has become. The lymph nodes will be filtering, slowly, patiently. The spleen will be monitoring the blood. The macrophages will be crawling through the tissues, checking for anything out of place. The memory cells will be resting but ready. And all of this is easier when you are still. The lymph flows more steadily when the muscles are relaxed. The heart beats more slowly, giving the blood a gentler passage through the vessels. The brain, quiet and dreaming, is not sending the constant signals of stress and alertness that can raise cortisol and dampen immunity. The whole body is in a state of calm cooperation with its own defense system. This is the loop closing, the connection between the very beginning of our tour and this moment. We started with the outer wall, the skin and the mucus and the stomach acid, the passive barriers that work without any conscious input. And we have traveled inward through the fast innate response, through inflammation and fever, through the quiet drainage of the lymph, through the slow learning of the adaptive system, through the locks and keys of antibodies, through the gentle training of vaccines, through the birthplaces in the marrow and the thymus, through the mistakes of allergy and autoimmunity. And now we arrive back at you, the whole person, lying in the dark, doing the one thing that supports all of it at once. Resting, breathing, letting the body work. You are not separate from your immune system. You are its home. You are the environment in which it lives and operates. And the way you treat that environment matters. Rest, quiet, calm, these are not luxuries. They are part of the defense. They are part of the quiet watch. And right now, you are providing them. You are giving your immune system the best possible conditions to do its work. Not by effort, not by striving, but by the simple, gentle act of lying down and letting go. So as you feel the weight of your body settling deeper into the bed, you can know that this weight is not a burden. It is a signal. It is the body's way of saying, I am here, I am resting. The watch can continue. The work can proceed. The factories are running, but they are running smoothly, without urgency, without alarm. The school is in session, but the lessons are gentle, the tests are fair, and the students are calm. The keys are on their hooks, the locks are quiet, the outer wall is intact, the first responders are ready, the learners remember. The drainage flows, and all of it, every single part of it, is wrapped in the soft, steady rhythm of your breath. In and out, in and out. A lullaby that has been playing since the moment you were born, and that will play until the moment you wake. But for now, you do not need to wake. You only need to rest. The immune system has you, and you have the quiet. The immune system has you, and you have the quiet. And now, as we reach the final section of our slow tour, we come not to a conclusion, not to a summary, but to an open door. We come to the questions that do not yet have answers, the edges of the map where the lines fade into soft, unmarked space. This is not a failing of science. It is the natural shape of understanding, which always has a frontier. And there is something deeply restful about sitting at that frontier, about acknowledging what is not yet known, without needing to fill the silence with guesses. The not knowing is a kind of peace. It is the quiet at the end of a long walk, when you stop and look out at a landscape that stretches further than you can see, and you do not need to walk any further tonight. Immunology, the study of the immune system, has answered a great many questions. We have walked through some of those answers in these sections: how the skin works as a barrier, how the innate system responds quickly and generally, how inflammation brings help to an injured site, how the lymphatic system drains and filters, how B cells and T cells learn and remember, how antibodies fit antigens like keys in locks, how vaccines train the system without causing illness, where immune cells are born and how they are educated, how allergies happen when the alarm is too loud, how autoimmunity happens when the body turns inward, how sleep supports all of this work. These are things we know, things that are well established, things that can be described calmly and accurately. But there are also things we do not know, and it is just as important to name them. Perhaps more important in a way, because the unknown is where the mind can rest. A question that is answered is a door that is closed. A question that is open is a door that lets in the night air, the soft breeze of possibility. So let us stand, very quietly, in front of a few of these open doors. One of the biggest open questions is why the immune response varies so much from person to person. You and I can be exposed to the same germ at the same time, in the same way, and yet we may respond very differently. One of us may get very sick, the other may have only a mild illness or no symptoms at all. One of us may clear the infection quickly, the other may take weeks to recover fully. One of us may develop long-lasting symptoms while the other returns to normal in a few days. What accounts for these differences? We know that age matters. Older people tend to have weaker immune responses, a phenomenon called immunosenescence, a word that simply means the aging of the immune system. We know that genetics matters. The genes we inherit from our parents shape how our immune cells behave. We know that previous exposures matter. A person who has encountered a similar germ before may have partial immunity from cross-reactive memory cells. We know that sleep, nutrition, stress, and other factors play a role. But even when we account for all of these things, there is still variation that we cannot explain. Two people who seem very similar on paper can still respond very differently to the same germ. There is an element of individuality to the immune system that we do not fully understand. It is as if each person's immune system has its own personality, its own quiet temperament, shaped by a lifetime of unique experiences and by factors we have not yet identified. This individuality is not a problem to be solved. It is simply a fact to be acknowledged, a mystery to sit with. Another open question concerns the persistence of memory cells. We know that memory B cells and memory T cells can last for decades, sometimes for a whole lifetime. A person who had measles as a child is usually immune for the rest of their life. A person who received a tetanus vaccine may have protective antibodies for 10 years, or 20, or longer. But how do these cells survive so long? Most cells in the body have a limited lifespan. They divide, they age, they die, and they are replaced. But some memory cells seem to sit quietly in the bone marrow or the lymph nodes for decades without dividing, or dividing only very rarely. How do they resist the normal processes of aging and death? What signals tell them to persist rather than to fade away? There are ideas, of course, certain survival signals, certain niches in the bone marrow that provide a kind of sheltered housing for these cells. But the full picture is not yet clear. The memory that protects you from a germ you met in childhood is stored in cells whose longevity is still, in some fundamental way, a mystery. That is a quiet thought. The protection you carry is real. It works. It has been proven over and over, but the exact mechanism by which it endures is still not fully mapped. Then there are questions about the microbiome, the vast community of bacteria and other microbes that live on your skin, in your mouth, in your gut, and in other parts of your body. These microbes are not invaders. They are residents. They are part of you. The immune system has to coexist with them, to tolerate them, to allow them to live peacefully while still being ready to attack their harmful relatives. How does the immune system tell the difference between a friendly gut bacterium and a dangerous one? How does it learn to tolerate the microbes that are helpful while still being able to respond to those that are harmful? This education begins very early in life, and disruptions to it may play a role in allergies and autoimmune diseases, but the details are still being worked out. The conversation between the immune system and the microbiome is a constant, ongoing negotiation, and we are only beginning to understand the language in which it is conducted. There are also questions about why some infections confer lifelong immunity while others do not. Why does a single infection with measles give you protection that lasts for the rest of your life, but you can get the common cold over and over again? Part of the answer is that the measles virus is very stable. Its antigens do not change much over time. The cold viruses, on the other hand, mutate rapidly, so the antigens on their surface change from year to year, and the antibodies you made against last year's cold do not fit this year's version. But this is not the whole story. Some germs seem to be better at hiding from memory cells, or at turning off the immune response, or at finding niches in the body where the immune system has less access. The full picture of why some memories last and others fade is still being assembled. And then there is the question of why autoimmune diseases develop when they do. We talked about this in the section on autoimmunity. The immune system sometimes turns inward, and we know some of the factors that make this more likely. Genes, infections, perhaps hormonal changes, perhaps environmental triggers. But we cannot yet predict who will develop an autoimmune disease, or exactly when, or why a person who has been healthy for 40 years suddenly develops rheumatoid arthritis or lupus. The immune system is not a static thing. It changes over a lifetime. The thymus shrinks. The bone marrow produces fewer new cells. The balance of different cell types shifts, and sometimes, in the middle of all this change, a self-reactive cell that was once kept quiet finds an opportunity to become active. The trigger, the exact moment of tipping, is often impossible to identify. We can describe the process, we can list the risk factors, but we cannot point to a single cause. The chain of events is too complex, too individual, too hidden in the quiet workings of the body over decades. This not knowing is not a failure. It is a reflection of the deep complexity of the system. The immune system is not a simple machine. It is an ecosystem, a community of cells and signals and feedback loops, and ecosystems are never fully predictable. So here we are, at the end of our tour, and we find ourselves not at a wall, but at a wide, open plain. The known is behind us, solid and well lit. The unknown is ahead, soft and dark and full of quiet possibility. And both are part of the same landscape. Both are part of the body's story. The things we know are remarkable, not in the sense of being dramatic, but in the sense of being worthy of quiet appreciation. The things we do not know are not gaps to be filled anxiously. They are spaces to rest in. They are reminders that the body, your body, is not a puzzle to be solved, but a living process to be lived within. As you lie here, on the very edge of sleep, you can let go of the need to understand everything. You can let the known facts drift away like leaves on a slow river. You can let the open questions remain open. The body does not need you to understand it. It has been doing this work since long before human beings ever started asking questions about it. The skin has been sealing. The macrophages have been eating. The B cells have been remembering. The lymph has been draining. The sleep has been restoring. And all of it has been happening without a single conscious thought, without a single word, without a single answer to any of the questions we have asked. The immune system does not know immunology. It simply does what it does. And it does it now, in you, in this moment, as you breathe in and breathe out, and let the weight of your body settle into the soft embrace of the bed. You can stop following the words now. You can let them fade into the background, like the sound of rain or the hum of a distant road. The tour is over, the guide is quiet, the body remains, watchful and calm, sealed and ready, learning and remembering, resting and restoring. The skin is still there, your outer wall, holding the world at bay. The first responders are still there, drifting through your blood and tissues, patient and alert. The lymph is still flowing, slow and quiet, through its gentle channels. The memory cells are still resting, their keys hanging on their hooks, their shapes stored in the deep library of you. The marrow is still making new cells, fresh and bright, full of random potential. And the open questions are still open as the night sky, as open as the dark behind your closed eyes. There is nothing more to learn tonight. There is nothing more to follow. There is only the quiet and the breath and the slow, steady work of a body that knows exactly what to do without ever being told. You are held. You are protected. You are part of a system that has been working for hundreds of millions of years, and it will work tonight, and it will work tomorrow, and it will work for all the nights and days to come. The watch continues. The watch is calm, and you can let go now, fully, gently, into the deep and waiting quiet of sleep.